Ready, Ms. Price?
Yes, I'm ready.
So, juror 61 is not here yet. We just called and she said that her daughter was not in labor, but her car got stolen. She's running late, and she thinks she'll be here by 9:30. That's where we are. Juror 61 has perennially gotten here at like 8:59 or 9:05, whereas all the other jurors have been here on time, ready to go, and they are all here. I guess we can wait a little bit. I'm anxious to keep moving, but juror 61's been listening carefully like everyone else. So my thought is we wait for a little bit and get an update to see where she is, and then we can have another discussion. Any thoughts from the state about that?
I agree.
Mr. Harvey, how about Ms. Clark?
Not about juror 61.
Okay. If there's something we can do now, that's great, and use the time. Jurors know why we're waiting. They know.
Charge conference.
Who's
Directed verdict.
They'll just wait. They know it's not us, they're waiting. What would you like to talk about, Ms. Clark?
Just wondering when the court is going to talk about scheduling and going into April, since it looks like we're headed that way.
Why don't we talk about scheduling? So states, I don't know what you all have been doing in terms of we're going to head in this direction or that direction, and being mindful as to how the jury is processing it, whether they want to move forward or not. What's your forecast? We seem to have shifted to law enforcement, and there are a few law enforcement folks here, but I don't know they'll necessarily take a ton of time the way this case played out. It's not the whodunit, as we've discussed before. What's your present forecast?
Well, I've regularly been updating. Is it okay if I keep my seat?
It is.
Okay. I've been regularly updating and having conversations with the defense about, witnesses, and kind of our best guess predictions about how long examinations will take. I can say to the court that I would expect that even given with the court's, the jurors proposed extended days. I know we've got 3 days, we'll go a little bit longer. I expect that our case will take the bulk of next week, given our pace and given the witnesses that I know that are to come that will be critical for us. And I know that they will be challenged very strongly by the defense, but we've got some big ones that are going to just take some time.
Okay. All right.
And I say the bulk of next week, it could be all of next week and even perhaps a day after that.
That would be the bulk of next week.
Yeah. I just want to make sure you didn't think I was trying to say Thursday at 5, I'm done.
Well, then we could just jump to the charge conference and closings on Friday. Okay.
You've got the directed verdict book.
Right. I didn't forget that. Okay. We probably should talk with the jurors to start understanding what their availability is that second week in April. I'm kind of nervous to talk to them about that, but we need to. What's the defense's perspective on scheduling? You just wanted to hear what was going on?
No, I knew that. I'm trying to figure out where we're going in April, because I can't remember what the jurors said about their commitments, and we've got sentencings and other hearings and things we need to start moving around now. So that's what was on my mind. What was your question? How long? Your question was how long?
What was on your mind?
Yes. Sorry.
That's
Your
all
question
right.
was how long you think we're going to take?
No,
Is that what
well,
Mr. Samuel was asking me? Sorry.
I just wanted your perspective on scheduling as well. You don't control the pace at which the state goes, other than your side has cross-examination. But beyond that, we if this case gets to a defense presentation, you had said, one of you had said in the past, it's a few days, it's not a 20-minute thing.
Right.
I've seen the witness list. Obviously, you can call from the state's witness list as well. And we don't know who all will be called by the state between now and the time when the state vests. Do you envision having conferred with the state, calling a bunch more witnesses than are on your witness list?
No.
No? Okay. All right.
Yeah, right, we're not giving up the right to call a bunch more, but at this time, given everybody that's on the state's witness list, I don't anticipate any dramatic changes.
Okay. All right.
But I need to, so going back to figuring out, when we're going in April, we need to talk to our witnesses and figure out what their availability is, and maybe make plans with them.
Their availability will be when you present your case, they need to be here.
But I need to tell them, right, if they have plans to be out of town the second week of April, you gotta change that.
I understand.
Whatever.
I understand. So, we just can't have that
Right.
conversation
Right.
quite yet because of Jury 61. It's in here.
And then I don't know we have to do it now, but at some point we still have some 807 issues to go over. Like Rachel Stiles and Mr. Rickard, some of the emails.
It's gone. Thank you. Try number 3. Right. I just signed my first bill of peace. I've been filing too many lawsuits in the courthouse. It's a tool I didn't know we had. Bill of peace.
Don't do that for like Afghanistan?
Exactly. Middle East, I just signed it. It's done. It's done. Yep. Stroke of a pen. Let's talk about 807 while we have time. Just to see at least where we've gotten on that. So Ms. Calhoun testified. You're currently not planning on, this go takes you way back, she was your first witness. She testified, and unless you plan to recall her, we've gotten past, she had 2 noticed statements to which there was an objection. And I can't remember if she ended up saying anything about Austin getting everything, but she didn't say that Ms. McIver said, I'm giving you money and cutting this other person out. So it wasn't elicited. So I think that's moot now, unless you're planning on recalling her. Then we need to revisit that. Danny Jo has testified extensively, so we've cleared that hurdle.
I plan to recall.
All right. I bet the jurors will smile when you do that. And you will duck from the tomatoes that
Just like you're smiling.
Ms. Schwal purportedly was going to talk about something, but that seems to have become less of a concern. Terry Brown has testified, and that went through. So there's Rachel Stiles.
Testified differently from what was in the
Terry, right, but Terry Brown's done, so we're not going to revisit that.
Right.
Rachel Stiles has not been called to testify. She did come in here and give us a little preview. Elaine Williams. Yeah, we got past her, and then there is Mr., not about the emails, but Mr. Rickard about the salary being reduced. I don't know if the state's pursuing that. The salary situation was pretty thoroughly covered through the Fisher and Phillips witnesses. I mean, that's there in black and white.
And he'll testify, the defendant told him the same thing, so,
Okay.
I understand.
So really, I see, apart from emails, Rachel Stiles being the one remaining one. At this point, is Rachel Stiles someone you're planning to call?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And part of what you'd ask her about is what she testified to when we had her come in for the preview?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay, why don't we talk about Rachel Stiles? Mr. Abate, why don't you tell me why you think her recollection that Ms. McIver told her, you just made copies of my new will, or something to that effect, not to come in under 807. While he's looking for that, where are we with the emails? Is that something that the sides have discussed?
Yes.
And to be clear, the emails, the state noticed a universe of emails between Ms. McIver and Harold Hudson, which I think a bunch of us saw at a hearing long ago with Harold Hudson, and then emails between Ms. McIver and Mr. McIver. That's what I meant by email. So there have been some discussions about
Mr.
that.
Body and I worked through those, but I think we're down to, whatever, we're working that out.
Okay.
But I'm not prepared today to deal with it. I don't think it's going to end up being a problem because I think all the ones that Mr. Body and I talked about, Mr. McIver's on the email, so I'm not really thinking as much about it.
Okay.
But we have one or two to work out, just like I worked out Carol, all the things.
You've been doing great work in the background. So what I'm going to do then is assume that there won't be an 807 objection from the defense as to the emails unless before whoever would be getting those emails in is called to the stand, you say, there were 5 who couldn't work out, let's look at these together.
And most is going to be one.
Okay. And on the topic of your hard work, it was represented yesterday by the state, and your colleagues didn't want to bind you to it, and they didn't, that you had received an edited version of what we've been calling Mr. McIver and team's statement to law enforcement, and that it looked like it wasn't going to be an issue.
That's correct. That's what I just said. We worked it out. I got a final version last night. I read it this morning, and I don't see any problems at all.
Great.
And I doubt it's going to be played today.
Okay. Thank you both sides for working through that. All right, Mr. Abate, I bought you some extra time.
Thank you.
Tell me your thoughts as to why under 807 Ms. Stiles should be able to say, Ms. McIver said you just made a copy of my new will.
Yes, Your Honor. As to, I guess, the indicia of reliability, you would say based on the totality of the circumstances that would come in under 807 through the, I guess, direct and cross-examination of Ms. Rachel Stiles in the hearing we had prior to trial. She made it clear that she had known Ms. McIver for around 30 years. They had met at a company function and kept the relationship up over the years. I think she, during her testimony, indicated that not only was she a close friend with Ms. McIver, but also did kind of odd jobs for her. She worked at the Corey company, which was supposed to be for 4 months, ended up being 4 years. And she worked closely with Ms. McIver. Furthermore, she said that over the years, even before that, she had been, I guess, watering plants and doing kind of household organization things for Ms. McIver. And she even indicated that she had the code and or key to the Buckhead condo as well as her Conyers home when she had it. And she also did some jobs at the ranch that she said she had access to. So as to, I guess, that from the relationship and the indicia of reliability of the relationship and the statements that were made to Ms. Stiles by Ms. McIver, I think we would meet that problem. As to, I guess, the necessity of...
Hold on one second. Still out here? Still. Okay. Did you get an update? No. Okay. Keep going.
As to the necessity, obviously Ms. McIver is unavailable, who is the declarant of the statement. The state would contend that the statement is evidence of a material fact in that it's the state's position that Ms. McIver created and published or executed a more recent will than the one that is currently being probated. And I believe during Ms. Stiles' testimony, she said between 2000 and 2014 or 2015 when she most recently saw the will. And her comments that, I guess her testimony was that Ms. McIver said, you know, could you please make a copy of these documents? She made a copy of the documents. She listened to what Ms. McIver said, which was basically, don't look at it. She didn't. And as soon as she handed the copies back to her, she said, you just make copies of my new will, which the state believes is a statement of evidence, which is a material fact to the theory of our case. There is no comparable evidence available because the state, through its investigation, has been unable to locate the will that Ms. Stiles was referencing. I think we went through the problem. The statement shows circumstantial guarantees of trustworthiness based on their relationship and the number of years that they have not only been close friends, but have been working day in and day out with each other. Based upon all that in the interest of justice, Your Honor, the state believes that Ms. Stiles' statement will come in about the will as just like, I guess, the statements that came in about Janie Calhoun. She made comments about the will, as well as Terry Brown, which was somewhat similar, and it provides corroboration to the fact that Terry Brown said he also was in possession of what was known to be Ms. McIver's will around the same time that Ms. Stiles made the copies. In addition, the state would be calling Ms. Janice Wall, who would also be making similar statements about an alleged will later in time, and Ms. McIver making statements that the ranch was going to be left to Austin.
Let me, before anyone jumps out of their chairs on the other side.
I misspoke. It would just be about the ranch estimate.
Okay, the only thing that you noticed as to Ann Schwall has to do with everything going to Austin.
Yeah, I got excited for a second.
Maybe, because it's going to make some other people excited too. Okay, that's a helpful analysis. Who wants to talk about that? Ms. Clark Palmer,
Yes.
it's your day.
It's my day.
We got a lot of Mr. Harvey, we'll give him a break.
It's just the morning, really, actually.
It's just the witness that was on
Oh,
the
it's just true. Damn,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Your Honor, I'm not focusing my argument on the relationship between Ms. Stiles and Ms. McIver. What I'm focusing on is the inconsistency with what Ms. Stiles said happened at the time. Number one, she said that Diane asked her to make a copy of this document that was maybe 2 or 3 pages long, not as long as the will would be. It wasn't on a legal-sized paper, didn't have a blue back, didn't have anything that would make it look like a formal legal document, which is, I think, usual to see in an executed will. She says to Rachel Stiles, I can't trust anybody else here in the office, despite the fact that Mr. Rickard, who does personal legal work for Diane McIver, and we've seen emails from Harold Hudson to Diane McIver where he says, since Mr. Rickard is your attorney, he needs to weigh in on this. So the fact that she says, I can't trust anybody else here at Corey, including my own personal lawyer, is inconsistent with her actually handing Ms. Stiles her new will. And then her telling Ms. Stiles that that's my new will is inconsistent with everything we've been told Ms. McIver said to other people. And it's inconsistent with the fact that we can't find a lawyer who drafted this will and have her executed at his office. And I can't totally figure out where we're going with the will. I didn't understand the questions to Mr. Brown about who got into the locked file cabinets where Diana keeps her personal papers. It sounded like Mr. Corey and Mr. Rickard got in there first before the documents ever made their way to this. So I can't figure out, are they arguing that Mr. McIver had the will and destroyed it? Or
They're not arguing anything yet, and we haven't heard from Mr. Corey. I think
Right.
there is TBD, yet to be heard, to be determined. Some witnesses have set up, well, boy, we need to hear from this person or this person to understand where did the things from the file cabinet go. We know ultimately, reportedly, they got on a truck that drove away.
Right.
And Mr. McIver's sister was
Right.
involved with that. But there's some pieces missing in between. So I don't know that that's inconsistent. It's just we don't know that part yet. But I'm curious, or I don't understand, when you say the statement, you just made copies of my new will, is inconsistent with other things Ms. McIver was saying. I follow the other, your arguments as to how it's not so consistent with, boy, Terry Brown was pretty darn trusted.
Right.
He actually was able to touch her finances, no one else was. She's got a personal lawyer, it's also the company lawyer there. So there are potentially other people in whom she appeared to place trust. But what's inconsistent about her saying, this is my new will, with some of these other statements, like, I'm going to leave the ranch in this way, or I'm going to take care of you, suggesting that there's change in the air to her for her estate planning.
So the statement to, I believe that Miss Williams, when she testified, not at the, I don't know, anyway, when she testified at trial, she didn't get into the contents of the codicil, but she talked about the fact that they were drafting the codicil for Miss McIver back in 2007. So that time frame is inconsistent. Miss Calhoun didn't say that Miss McIver said, I have changed my will. Just said, oh, I'm thinking about it. I'm going to put you in there, but one of the conditions is you've got to divorce your husband, right? So talking about something that may happen in the future. The statement to Danny Jo Carter, I think what Miss Carter testified to was not that Miss McIver had updated her will, but she said at one point she was going to leave her money. But that conversation occurred before there was distance in between them, which would have been before she ever married Mr. McIver.
Years ago.
Right, years ago. It's inconsistent with the emails between Mr. Hudson and Miss McIver. There's no email that says, okay, we have an appointment on this day for you to come in and execute the will. The time that they were discussing what the changes to her will would be 2011, 3 years before she makes this statement to Ms. Stiles.
Okay. And then that's the Aceturo case that Mr. Samuel, or you, one of you shared, your appellate section, or you, that you all are actually able to, the opponents to the 807 admission is able to point to inconsistencies out there, whereas the proponent can't say, look how it fits in nicely with these other things.
Right.
Okay. I have learned that juror 61 is here. So I will take this as having been argued. I will rule on it today during one of our breaks. I'll let you know what we're doing. Although it doesn't sound like Rachel Stiles would be called today, but you might as well get closure on that so everyone knows how that's going to play out. I'm going to have juror 61 come in here and just give us an update as to what's going on so that we can maybe avoid this going forward. And then unless there's anything else, she can go back and then we'll bring all the jurors in. And hopefully Officer Stroup, that's a key penguin, not B Bravo, is out there. Okay, great. Ms. Clark-Palmer, anything we need to talk about before Officer Stroup comes in? Great, if we could. That'd be great. Thank you. Let's bring 61 out, please.
Yes.
Now I know what that means. You wrote this? Okay. All right. Before I ask you what you think about that, Deputy Murphy explained to me that one or more jurors have approached him about having juror 61 removed. So that dynamic is at play. Mr. Rucker, your thoughts at this point?
I think juror 61 was qualified to serve. I think she has, based on my observations, served with, as the court has described, energy and enthusiasm. I've seen her pay attention and take notes. Quite often it takes time for the personal dynamic within the jury room to kind of gel, and sometimes it doesn't gel, and that's okay too. I think what the law requires is that each person, if you get that far, that they participate in deliberations, and that they render a true verdict. And so I don't think that anything that she has said regarding her personal circumstances over the course of the last couple of days would cause her to be removed. And understanding the concerns of the other jurors, I would say that it was premature to do anything, because I don't think that rises to the level that she should be excused.
Okay. I'll observe for the record that the few times we've had to start late because jurors weren't here, it's been juror 61. That's been the reason for that. I think all but one of the times we haven't been able to go a little bit later. It's been juror 61 saying that she wasn't able to, whereas all the others were able to. I don't know if that's what's behind their concern, but I think you're right, Mr. Rucker. Right now, the personal dynamics really aren't the operative question because they're not deliberating. I think maybe this is logistical frustration coming from the others, but who knows? Who from the state, Mr. Samuel? Wait, from the defense.
I know it's confusing sometimes, but
Not really.
We agree substantively with the answer. I'd like to know more about what Deputy Morgan knows, who, why. Murphy, I'm sorry.
It's okay, I called you state, you called him Morgan. Now,
I'm not sure which is more insulting.
probably Morgan.
As far as the jurors, sounds like the beginning of the Passover story. We've only had 2 plagues so far, there's probably more to go, but I would not, we would certainly be opposed to excusing her at this point. And again, I'd like to know more about who's complaining and if the deputy knows why. But even more important, from a practice standpoint, if we can go back to 20 minutes ago, we may be losing more jurors, and just, to kind of willy-nilly start saying, well, let's get rid of jurors just so we can start at 9 o'clock rather than 9:05. I think we'd better find out, as Amanda said a little while ago, what's going to happen in the middle of April.
I think that's right. I think there may be a reshuffling of positions once we explore that with the jury. We just may lose others anyway. And so let me ask Deputy Murphy. I'm not interested so much as at this point as to who was talking with you so much as if they articulated a reason for wanting to move forward without the 61.
I didn't ask anything specifically. They just had asked if they could vote to have a member removed. And
They have too much survivor.
Yeah.
right? Because they want to work with the court with the schedule.
Okay.
And a lot of the issues with scheduling and not being able to stay later or get here on time has been from that particular juror.
Okay. That's a fair concern, but I think Mr. Samuel and Ms. Clark Palmer are spot on in that we ought to have the April conversation first, because we may only have 12 left anyway, and if that includes 61, my golly, 61 staying. So we'll talk about that after we get some more trial under our belts. Anything else from the state before we bring the jury in?
No, sir.
Anything from the defense? No. If we could have Officer Stroup come on in and the jurors, please.
All rise for the jurors. All jurors are present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. You all can be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Happy Thursday. A couple things before we pick up with Officer Stroup again. First, apologize for giving you bad information last night. I got home and told my guys, let's put on the NC2As, and my older son looked at me and said, hey, you really don't know much about sports, do you? We were relegated to SpongeBob and Electric Company. Tonight, maybe so. I'll just stay out of the entertainment. You guys watch what you want to watch. Second thing, we were able to use the time from 9 until now work through some things that might otherwise have forced you all to take a break. So it wasn't time lost. We were productive on this side. And we wanted to give you a little extra time to celebrate your 20th birthday. Happy birthday, Chris. I'm confident that when you came down here with your summons low those many weeks ago, you were able to tell your family, don't worry, I'll be home for birthday. Well, you're with your new family, and we're happy to celebrate your birthday with you. So, happy 27th. We're going to return to Officer Stroup's testimony. In case any of you went home with a heavy heart thinking, didn't we spend like 100 days at Emory Hospital already? We're shifting to, it sounds like, hearing from law enforcement witnesses, and you've heard what Officer Stroup had to say about how law enforcement first got involved with the situation. But it sounds like we will be moving from Emory Hospital soon. And with that, I believe, Ms. Convery, you had not quite been able to wrap up your examination before we ran out of time.
Good morning. Officer Stroup, we left off sort of talking about APD coming in, and you are sort of on your way out, transitioning the investigation over to APD. But what I wanted to do is just sort of, if you would, and I will approach you with State's Exhibit 258, but let's tell the jury sort of the master timeline of your night from start to finish.
Okay.
Sort of from dispatch to APD.
So I was dispatched at about 22:18.
At 10:18?
Yes, 10:18 p.m. Sorry.
All right, regular time. All right.
And I arrived at 10:26 p.m.
And is APD dispatch.
Okay, that would be 10:35 p.m.
APD arrives.
At 11:24 p.m.
11:24?
Yes.
Okay. And then tell the jurors, when did you, sort of the next significant thing, I guess, is you learn of Mrs. McIver's passing. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what time is that?
I'd have to check this. Approximately 1:20 a.m.
And what's the signal on the CAD for that?
1056D.
I'm sorry?
1056D.
Thank you. And what time is that?
1:20 a.m.
And at 1:20 a.m., did you communicate what you learned about Diane McIver's status to APD?
Yes.
Do you know who at APD you communicate that to?
When I met with Robeson L., I think they did their interview portion, and at some point I got his telephone number, and I told him I'd update him if there was a change in patient status, because originally she was in critical condition. When I learned that she was deceased, then I texted him and let him know.
Okay. And the text that you sent to Detective Robeson L. from APD, was that pretty close in time to when you actually learned about the death yourself?
Yes.
Okay. Back at the scene when APD arrived, you said the patient was in critical condition. If you know, was APD aware at that point of sort of how critical Ms. McIver was?
I'm not sure. I probably mentioned, or I did mention that she was in critical condition, and that there was a moment where she was talking and speaking, and then there was a moment where she lost, I guess, consciousness. So I told him about that shift.
Okay, and so you knew about sort of the development and status at the time that APD arrived on scene to Emory?
Yeah, a little bit.
Tell the jurors, at any point in the evening, did you talk to any members of the valet staff?
I don't remember exactly who in the valet, but I did speak with them to ask, what happened to the vehicle. And I also told them in the future, if there's any cars where, a potential crime occurs, please don't valet park it.
Why'd you do that?
Because it's a crime scene and you don't want things tampered with. So
The communication that you're telling the jury about with the valet, did you do that after you had already radioed for APD?
yes,
Okay, and so you're still kind of assisting on scene after you've already called for APD to turn the scene over?
yes.
Tell the juries, did you ever talk to any hospital personnel, nurses? You told us a little bit about the public safety that you spoke to. Did you ever talk to any medical staff?
I spoke with nurses just kind of in passing. Didn't gather much information from them.
Did a nurse, a specific nurse approach you or come seek you out about anything?
Yes, Nurse Terry at some point approached me.
Okay. Nurse Terry, tell the jurors how it is that you know somebody as Nurse Terry.
Well, she is I think she's the night nurse supervisor, and so for various reasons we're called to the emergency department, whether it be they need assistance with a patient or something like that, or another crime has occurred actually in the hospital, and so she is, as a night worker, I see her often, so I'm kind of familiar with her.
All right, so this is someone you had the opportunity to interact with before coming to Emory that night?
Yeah, multiple occasions.
Describe for the jurors, when you say Nurse Terry, what does she look like?
She has glasses, blonde hair, she's a white female, shorter, maybe 5 something.
And
Not exactly sure. Sorry.
Okay, close enough. Does Nurse Terry approach you, or do you actually approach her?
She approaches me.
Okay, and without telling us what she says, does she communicate something to you about an observation that she has?
Yeah, she does.
Okay, that information that you received from Nurse Terry, do you communicate that to anybody else?
When APD gets there, I think as a part of the, general summary of the things that happened, I include, by the way, the nurse said XYZ.
And did you stay on scene to see sort of everything that Detective Robeson-L and Detective Ricker did at the hospital?
I didn't. After they were there, I felt that the scene was secure, and I didn't need to really put my hands in the pot, so to speak. So I believe that's when I went to the vehicle with Nixon and stood by.
Based on what you know from working on the Emory campus, but specifically the hospital, are there any, what's the camera situation like inside the hospital? Is there video surveillance inside the actual emergency room?
As far as I know, there wouldn't be. I believe that would be a violation of, health, HIPAA.
Yes.
Just
Not
for
to your knowledge.
patient privacy, yeah.
What about cameras on the outside of the emergency room, aside from the main valet area there?
I'm not familiar with any in the area besides for the valet.
Okay, and as part of your employment with Emory, have you ever had to request or pull that video from the valet area before?
Personally, no.
But other people in your department, it sounds like?
I can't say with 100% certainty, so.
No specific occasion where you've had to pull that video?
No.
After you talk to Nurse Terry, you transition the scene over to APD, do you actually leave the hospital?
Yes.
Okay, do you know about what time you leave?
I couldn't say exactly what time I leave the physical hospital because it was in the course of from my dispatch time to the time that I actually leave. And after Robeson-L and Ricker arrive, I go to where Officer Nixon is and basically relieve him so he can go back in service.
And when you say you go to where Officer Nixon is, where is Officer Nixon at the point that you sort of relieve him?
He is at the lower gate parking deck watching the white Ford.
Okay, and so you actually take over that job, it sounds like.
Yes.
Who relieves you from watching the white SUV?
An APD officer, I don't remember the name or badge number.
Someone outside your jurisdiction?
Yes, someone with the Atlanta Police Department.
Tell the jurors if you know, what county is the Clifton Road Emory campus located in?
It's in DeKalb County unincorporated, or it was.
In 2016?
Yes, in 2016 it was.
In your time at the Emory Police Department, tell the jurors, have you responded to a gunshot wound at Emory Hospital before?
Yes, I've responded to one other gunshot wound. It happened in DeKalb County, and it was a similar situation where it was fatality as a result of the gunshot. And so, having dealt with that approximately maybe 2 weeks to a month before this incident, I kind of had a little bit of like close experience, with dealing with the proper protocols and procedures.
That gunshot wound that you said happened in DeKalb County, do you know about how close to the hospital that occurred?
Yeah, that happened.
Subjection to relevance.
It's
Close to the
relative.
hospital occurred.
We've discussed in detail in this trial about access to the hospital. He's just testified that the other gunshot wound he investigated happened in this county. I think the jury's entitled to hear where in relation to the hospital.
Where the gunshot occurred?
Yes,
Okay.
and I'm gonna limit it to just,
That's fine, if you're limiting it to that.
I am.
Overruled.
You can answer if you know the
Okay.
question.
Yes, so within maybe a mile or two, I can tell you, it was on a street called Shepherd's Lane, and there's Shepherd's Lane, Briarcliff, and then you're on Clifton Road, which is the street that the hospital is on. So it would have been, 5 minutes driving, maybe.
On the exhibit that you have in front of you, is there a notation about when you were clear from the scene or when you were cleared?
Yes. So I returned to service, meaning I was able to respond to the calls at 1:10 a.m.
And at 1:10 a.m., when you're sort of free for other calls, are you still at Emory Clifton Road Hospital?
So 1:10 would have been when APD arrived to take custody of the vehicle.
Okay.
And once they had custody of the vehicle, I was no longer tied to any necessary portion of the investigation. So I believe I returned to the hospital to speak with maybe Sergeant Shaw about patient status, and that's when I learned shortly after about status.
Okay, and is that why we see sort of in our timeline that you update on the status about 10 minutes after you're actually cleared?
Yes, so I would have been still able to receive any other service calls, but just as a part of taking a little extra step, I was getting the patient's condition.
All right, and once you do that, you update Officer Robesonel. Does that complete your involvement in this particular investigation?
Yes.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor, if you redirect.
Okay. Ms. Clark-Palmer.
Thank you, Judge. Is it Officer Stroup?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good morning. My name's Amanda Clark Palmer. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to back up a little bit and not make you rehash everything you just said, but make sure I understand what exactly you did and when. So you get the call at 10:18 p.m. that there's been a gunshot at the hospital, or someone with a gunshot has arrived to the hospital?
Yes.
And you are referring to that state's exhibit, which you told us is the CAD report, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Because sitting here today, you don't remember exactly the time you responded to the hospital, right?
Not the time, exactly.
You don't remember all the details of everything that happened on September 25th and 26th, 2016, correct?
I wouldn't remember minute by minute, I think.
Right. So it helps to have a report or something that you can use to refresh your recollection about certain things, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you said you're in your uniform when you go to the hospital, right?
That's correct.
Do you drive there in a marked car?
I do.
Okay. So it says Emory Police on the side?
Yes, it says in the police.
Where are you on the campus at 10:18 when you get the call?
I couldn't tell you exactly where I was at the time.
Are you on the campus?
Yes.
Okay. Do you go lights and sirens to the hospital?
No, since the patient is in the hospital, there's no continued risk, so I wouldn't want to put the jeopardy of the public at safety, at risk while responding, in a fashion like that.
Okay. All right, so you go, don't turn the lights on, don't turn the sirens on, but you go to the hospital
Yes.
and get there in 8 minutes, right?
Yes,
From wherever you are on the campus.
that's correct.
All right. And you go into the hospital and you encounter Mrs. Carter and Mr. McIver, correct?
Sergeant Shaw first.
Okay.
And then,
Because he tells you, you show up and say, okay, I'm here about the gunshot, and he kind of tells you, okay, here's the people who are here with the woman who's been shot. He kind of directs you where to go, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so you go, and Mr. McIver and Ms. Carter are in the waiting area when you encounter them, or I missed that part?
well, I said they were in the family consult room.
Okay. All right, the family consult room. So you go in there, right?
Yes.
And you speak to them, correct? Introduce yourself?
Yes.
All right. And is it at that time that you separate them?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us, I think, that you take Miss Carter over to kind of a different waiting area near the ambulance bay doors, or where was
No,
it?
the family consult room was there. It's near the ambulance bay doors. The waiting area that I took her to was near the entrance for the valet.
Okay. All right. So you separate the two of them, correct?
Yes.
And you talk to, and you told us that Mrs. McIver is actually being worked on by the medical staff when you get there, right?
Yes.
And you think that by the time you get to the hospital, Mrs. McIver has been in the ER for about 10 minutes?
I don't know exactly how long she's been there.
Okay.
Because we get the call from public safety, so I don't know at what point that he says that she is there, so
Okay.
I couldn't say for sure that she was there for 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. But Mrs. McIver is being treated by the medical staff when you get there?
Yes.
All right. So you talk to Ms. Carter and kind of ask her what happened, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And how long do you think you talked to her? Just a few minutes.
Probably somewhere around 10, maybe 15 minutes.
Do you have a notepad with you? Are you making notes as you're talking to her?
Not really. I have a
Would
pretty...
you have a notepad with you?
No.
Okay. So are you taking notes when you
no.
talk to Ms. Carter?
No.
Okay. All right. You're just kind of remembering what she's telling you mentally.
Yes.
All right. And she tells you that she was driving in a car with Diane McIver and Tex McIver, right?
I'm going to object as to hearsay unless it's for some other purpose. But as to what Ms. Carter said.
Well,
So the objection is hearsay.
But Ms. Carter's already testified, and I'm not necessarily offering it for the truth of the matter asserted to prove that Ms. Carter was driving in a car with Ms. McIver and Mr. McIver.
So what's the purpose of, I appreciate she's testified, but that's sort of neither here nor there. What's the purpose for having this witness say, here's what
To
someone out of court said?
explain his conduct and actions. Because he talked about how he gets to the hospital, and once he learns what's happened, he learns that maybe potentially a crime has happened, and that's what I'm exploring.
Okay, why don't you just ask him what he did next? That's sort of the way we've had to do it in the past when there's been a hearsay objection about things said to folks. Well, why don't you just tell us what you did next? So,
Well, in order to explain what he did next, which we've heard about already, I want to ask him what he heard in order to make him do what he did next.
okay, I'm going to sustain the objection.
You learned, well, as part of your investigation, you wanted to know what happened, right? How did this person show up with the ER with a gunshot wound, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you first get to the ER, you tell us that you think Mr. McIver may potentially be a victim in the case, right? You don't have one.
Victim, he may be affected by it.
You said victim yesterday, didn't you, or did I mishear you?
I did say victim.
Okay. You thought maybe potentially he might be a victim of something that had happened that caused this gunshot wound, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't talk to Mr. McIver initially, correct?
That is correct. Besides for,
Introducing
Officer Stroup in the police department.
You don't interview him? Is that a fair thing to say?
No, I do
Okay.
not.
You don't want to intrude on him at that point in time, correct?
At that point, yeah, no, I wanted to speak with Ms. Carter instead.
And you don't want to intrude on Mr. McIver because his wife has been shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes or no.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Have you ever testified in court before?
I have.
Okay, how many times?
Maybe 2 or 3 times.
All right, so you know you have to say yes or no so the court reporter can take it down, right?
Okay.
All right. So Mr. McIver's wife has been shot, right?
Yes.
And at that point, you know she's in critical condition?
No.
Okay.
Not at that point.
Okay.
It's later when I found out.
All right, but you don't want to intrude on him by interviewing him because of the situation, correct?
Correct.
But then you talk to Mrs. Carter, right?
Yes.
Okay, and after you talk to her, now you're thinking, oh, maybe potentially a crime has occurred, right?
Possibly.
And maybe Mr. McIver's involved, correct?
Well, no. I know he's involved
Okay.
because she said that he had the gun that shot her.
Miss Carter told you that Mr. McIver shot his wife, correct?
Yes.
She told you that he accidentally shot his wife, correct?
She said that I couldn't tell you word for word verbatim that I couldn't say that she said he accidentally shot her or he shot her.
So let me jump ahead, because one thing you did at the end of your time on this night at Emory Hospitals, you went back and you wrote a report, correct?
I did.
Okay. And writing a report is something that you do as part of your job, right?
That's correct.
It's one of your functions that you have to do.
Yes.
Probably your favorite thing you get to do, right?
Yeah. Love it.
Love it, okay. But writing reports is important as part of your job as a police officer, am I right?
That's correct.
And do you actually get training on writing a report?
Yes, there are. Advanced for court writing is one of the courses that you take. So.
Okay, sounds riveting. And in report writing, you are trained that you need to write down not a verbatim transcript of what happened, but you want to try to record some of the details of whatever it is that you are investigating or responded to, right?
If I was investigating it, yes.
Okay. You write down who the people that are involved are, correct? That
Yes.
might be one thing you include in a report.
That is?
Name, race, sex, contact information, right?
Yes.
You would write down on your report the time that you started investigating or whatever it is you were doing, right?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. And one of the reasons you write reports is to kind of document what you did, correct?
Yes.
Document what you learned, correct?
Correct.
Because you know that at some point in the future, somebody may call on you and say, hey, tell me about what you did on September 25th, 2016, right?
Yes.
And you might go back and refer to your report to help refresh your memory, right?
I've done it before, yes.
And you know that other people might refer to your report to see, hey, let me find out what Officer Stroup did on September 25th, 2016, right?
That is correct.
And you wrote a report about this incident we're talking about, correct?
I wrote an assist report about this incident, yes.
Assist report?
Yes.
Is that different from a regular report?
It is.
How's it different?
Well, normally if I were investigating, I would, speak about how I investigated it. But in this incident, we are not the primary law enforcement authority for this case.
Okay.
So when we write an assist report, we limit going into a lot of details because we are not investigating, basically.
But you still try to be accurate even in an assist report, correct?
Yes.
You don't write down things that aren't true in an assist report, correct?
No.
Okay. So you wrote an assist report in this case, right?
I did.
Have you looked at it recently?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask my question again.
Okay.
That night, Ms. Carter told you that Mr. McIver accidentally shot his wife, correct?
My objection would be the same, Your Honor, as to hearsay.
Right.
I've asked.
If you
Stop. Your question calls for hearsay, and unless you're telling me you're not offering to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
I'm not. I am not offering it to prove that Mr. McIver accidentally shot his wife.
Okay, so why we're spending a lot of time on did he talk to Ms. Carter first, which he said he did.
Right?
So
So
you'd be offering it to explain his conduct?
partially to explain his conduct, partially to, for the same reason that we elicited it from Ms. Carter herself to explain what she told the police prior to Mr. McIver allegedly telling her to say she was not involved.
So you don't envision anyone from the defense arguing to the jury, one way we know it was an accident is because Ms. Carter told Emory police it was an accident?
Well, the argument of the defense is not because Ms. Carter said it was an accident, therefore we're done. But it goes to count 5, I think it is, and to why Mr. McIver would ask Ms. Carter to say something different when she has already said to the police something that is helpful to him, which is that he accidentally shot his wife.
Then I'll sustain the objection.
You learned where the gunshot happened, correct?
Approximately where it happened?
You learned it happened near Piedmont Park, right?
Yes, somewhere
Okay.
out there.
You learned that it happened in a car, correct?
Yes.
Okay, you learned it happened in a 2013 white Ford Expedition, right?
I would have to see the report to remember the year.
Would that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
I'm just showing him his report.
Yes, a 2013 white Ford Expedition.
Okay, all right, thank you. And you learned from Ms. Carter that the vehicle was parked with the valet, right?
Initially, I actually learned the vehicle was, I would have to see the report. I'm not clear on exactly who would have first mentioned it. I might have asked Sergeant Shaw about whether the vehicle was valet parked. But in the process of talking with her, she did mention it as well.
Okay. And didn't you tell us that after talking to Ms. Carter, after you talked to Ms. Carter, didn't you tell us that that's when, in your mind, you think it potentially goes to being a crime?
Yes.
Okay. Because she's told you that Mr. McIver shot his wife.
Yes.
Okay. But you say it goes to potentially being a crime in your mind, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You're not sure, right?
Not at all.
Need some more investigation, right?
Yes.
Because even accidental discharges of firearms may not be a crime, right?
That's correct.
Okay. You know that people accidentally discharge their firearms sometimes, right? Do you know other police officers who've done that?
Personally?
So what's the relevance as to whether this gentleman has ever heard or experienced or been around? I'm going to sustain a couple of pieces. Next question.
All right. So you, after speaking with Ms. Carter, you tell her to stay where she is, correct?
In the waiting area.
And you give her instructions not to go back and talk to Mr. McIver?
I don't give her explicit, I ask her to please stay and wait here.
Okay.
While APD is en route.
Okay. And then, when do you encounter Mr. Maples?
At some point between speaking with OIC Ritchie and having Officer Nixon go.
Can we put it in relation to our timeline up here? Is it before you talk to APD dispatch?
No, it would be sometime between APD's dispatch and their actual arrival time.
Okay, so sometime we think between 10:35 and 11:24, Mr. Maples arrives.
Yes.
And he comes up and talks to you?
Yes, he is. I met him in one of the hallways at a certain point, and he introduced himself.
And he gave you a business card?
He might have shown me a business card. I don't think he gave me one.
Okay. And then he asked you where Mr. McIver is?
Yes.
And do you tell him?
I direct him to the family consult where Mr. McIver is.
Okay. Do you know, I mean, you don't sit and watch Mr. McIver the entire time that you're there, correct?
I do not.
Okay. All right. So do you know if he ever goes up to the 3rd or 4th floor of the hospital? Do you see that?
I was not present after he. The only time I ever made contact with him is during his time at the family consult room in the emergency department area.
In the beginning, when you first get there?
No, I come in contact with him multiple times throughout, but all those times that I come in contact with him are in the emergency department.
Okay. You don't ever go to the 3rd or 4th floor?
I didn't know they went to the 3rd or 4th floor.
Okay. All right, so when do you walk past the room and you hear Mr. McIver and Mr. Maples talking?
I can't give you an exact time. It is.
Can you put it in relation to our timeline that's on the board there?
Again, sometime in the approximate hour between APD being dispatched, or my arrival really, and APD arrival.
Okay, so sometime between 10:35 and 11:24.
That is correct.
Okay, and you're walking past the family consult room?
Yes,
You said you overhear something in passing?
that's correct.
Okay, and from what I understood your testimony, am I right, you don't remember exactly what Mr. McIver said?
I remember him.
Well, let me rephrase my question.
Okay.
Do you remember the exact words that he said?
As he was talking, I don't remember the totality of the conversation, but I remember him saying, "What do I say? What's the plan?"
You remember him saying, "What do I say? What's the plan?"
Yes.
But you didn't hear what he said before that.
I did not.
You didn't hear what he said after that.
No.
And he's the gentleman who's at the emergency room whose wife has been shot, correct?
Yes.
And by that time, we know she's in critical condition, correct?
I would say yes.
Okay.
At that point, I do know. Yes.
Okay. Do you know Mr. Maples at all, other than him introducing himself to you?
Not really. No.
Okay. You don't know the relationship between Mr. Maples and Mr. McIver?
No.
Don't know how long they've known each other?
No.
Don't know how long, you don't know if they're friends, right?
I have no idea.
Okay. And you don't remember exactly what Mr. McIver said, right? You told us what you think you heard, but you don't remember exactly, right?
No, I don't. Again, I couldn't tell you the whole conversation because it was in passing, but it really stuck out that he was asking, what should I say? What's the plan?
It stuck out to you?
Yes.
Okay. It stuck out so much that you wrote it down in your assist report?
No, I wouldn't write that because, again, that is an assist report, so I'm not doing the investigation. That is something that I would have discussed or told Rose and Elle or Ricker, but I didn't put that because the subject of the report is me assisting APD, and through me assisting them, that wouldn't be a part of an investigation role on my end. I wasn't investigating the crime.
But you told us it stuck out. you told us you thought potentially a crime had occurred, right?
I did.
Okay. You wrote down in your assist report some of the details that you learned about what had happened, right?
The basic details, yes.
Right. You wrote down where it happened, right?
Yes.
You wrote down that it happened in a car, right?
Yes.
You wrote down who was there, right?
Yes.
You wrote down that you talked to Miss Patricia Carter, right?
Yes.
You wrote down things that were important to document, right?
For the assist report, yes, the things that were important to note that I was assisting Atlanta Police Department and not conducting an investigation.
So this comment that stuck out in your mind was not important enough to write down?
Yes, it would have been important enough to write down if I were the primary law enforcement agency investigating the crime. But since, again, this is an assist report, which is the title of the report, assists other law enforcement agency, specifically Atlanta Police Department, then I wouldn't have gone into specific investigative information because that is not the role that I was serving at the time.
Your role, though, is you are assisting their investigation, correct?
No. So I'm assisting them. I'm sort of the liaison between the victim and the subject and the APD for this instance. So I bridge the gap and let them know if for instance, if hospital security had not called them, then APD would not have arrived. Or I mean, since I was the one, or our dispatch were the people who contacted APD. Hospital security did not. So in that function, we are the bridge between those two. We learned of something that requires law enforcement action, and we learned that it happened outside of our jurisdiction. And since we don't have primary jurisdiction over that incident, we do not investigate it.
Okay. Assist, liaison, whatever. You are collecting details about what happened, right?
The basic details to let Atlanta know that a crime that we learned about happened in their jurisdiction and they should send someone to investigate it.
Right, and you go out and you make sure that nothing happens to the car, right?
Yes, I
The
make sure.
mobile crime scene, as you called it, right?
Yeah, I make sure that no one enters, besides for the valet who we already had, we make sure that no one else is able to tamper with that scene. We try and maintain it as best we can.
Okay. So you go out and you secure the vehicle, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you look inside the vehicle, right? We went over some photos yesterday, correct?
Yes.
You looked inside the vehicle, you saw the gun, right?
Through the rear window, yes.
Part of collecting the basic details of what happened, right?
Actually, that part was just because I was trying to see if what it looked like. It wasn't for, really me looking in there was not for evidence collection because I was not investigating the crime.
It was just because you were curious?
Yes.
Okay. Just wandering around, nothing else to do but looking at the car and satisfy your curiosity?
Next question.
You get the keys to the vehicle, correct?
I'm not sure if I did or if Officer Nixon did. I would have to look in our report if I noted that.
And then you, at some point you go back and you talk again to Miss Carter? Or you only talk to her one time?
I only talked to her to get the initial details because I do not want to start the investigation. So if I talk to her again, it is through the course of maintaining scene integrity to the best of my ability.
Did you talk to her again and tell her to stay away from Mr. McIver?
I wouldn't have told her to stay away again. I was letting her know that she should wait in this area for APD to arrive.
So you didn't say that to her?
I would have to look at my report to see. Thank you. So no, I wouldn't have spoken with her multiple times to ask her to stay away from Mr. McIver.
Okay. Your Honor, I do want to ask another question, but could we approach before I ask it? I don't want to run afoul of a ruling in the court.
Okay.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Connery, we'll let Ms. Clark Palmer collect your stuff, but do you have redirect?
Very, very brief.
Okay.
Officer Stroup, Ms. Clark Palmer asked you a couple questions about your interaction, your brief interaction with Mr. Maples. When he presents identification to you, the business card, is that as a result of your request, or does he just show you that card?
He shows me kind of to explain why he's there and why he should be allowed, to speak with Mr. McIver, the defendant.
And do you ask him for identification before he shows you that?
No.
Those are all my questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Any questions from the jurors for Officer Stroup? You pass them to the left. Hope you all had a good reunion with Deputy Murphy. He is back with us today. Well, they were really appreciative of all the good work Deputy Kane did, Deputy Murphy. Him buying them lunch was exceptionally nice. I'm thinking about doing that.
Yes.
Did Mr. Maples present the business card to you or to Mr. McIver?
Not to Mr. McIver. It was to me in the hallway area as I was getting him back there, kind of first learning who he is and why I should be escorting him to the defendant.
You shared with us that Nurse Terry shared some information with you, not what the information was, but that she shared some things with you. Do you recall relaying that to either of the APD officers?
I wouldn't have said specifically, but I told them, hey, the nurses are saying whatever.
When you say specifically, you would not have attributed it to Nurse Terry?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have said Nurse Terry said quotes. I would have said you should, if the nurses are saying things, and you should talk to them during the course of your investigation.
Did you relay to either of the Atlanta police officers what you overheard Mr. McIver say when you were walking past the family consult room?
Yes, that, since it was firsthand knowledge, I told them specifically.
Any follow-up, Ms. Convery?
Just one. Officer Stroup, when you are presented with this business card there as you're taking Mr. Maples back, does he indicate to you in any way why he needs to go see Mr. McIver?
No, it didn't seem, no,
Okay.
sorry.
And do you remember any details about the actual card itself, the information on the card?
No.
As you're taking Mr. Maples, do you agree then to take Mr. Maples back to see Mr. McIver?
Yes, if he wants, as long as there's no issue with the hospital allowing it, then I would have allowed it.
All right, and at that point, while you're taking him back, what is your understanding there of who Mr. Maples is to Mr. McIver? What he's there for?
I'm not exactly sure why he's there. He mentioned being an attorney, so
don't speculate. Just,
okay.
If you don't know,
Yeah.
say I'm here because of X. Then
Okay, yeah. No, he didn't say I'm here for XYZ. He just said who he was, and I showed him to Mr. McIver.
All right, and last question. Part of who he was that he was an attorney in that first interaction, is that right?
Yes, interaction, yes.
Those are my only questions.
Ms. Clark Palmer, any follow-up for Officer Stroup?
No.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You are all clear, or whatever the term was. Return to duty.
Return to sleep.
Yeah, return to sleep. All right.
Did you guys want?
just leave at the podium whatever was handed to you, and the lawyers will take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Your Honor, State Calls Officer Brian Ricker.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you should give the court this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. If you will, get as close to the mic as you can. For the purposes of the court's record, please state and spell your name.
Brian Ricker, R-I-C-K-E-R.
Officer Ricker, you are soft-spoken, so if you could move a little closer to the microphone, that would help everyone. Thank you. Ms. Conlon?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start by having you introduce yourself to the jury again and tell them where you are currently employed.
Brian Ricker, Atlanta Police Department.
And tell the jury, what do you do for the Atlanta Police Department?
I'm a police officer.
How long have you been a police officer with APD?
I've been employed by APD for 14 years.
Okay. And what's your current, you told us you're an officer, but what's your current assignment within APD?
Zone 2.
And how long have you been assigned to Zone 2?
1 week.
Okay. And prior being an officer with Zone 2, what shift are you working right now at Zone 2?
Evenings.
Prior to your current assignment, your new assignment, what was your last assignment?
Detective in the financial investigations.
And what does that mean, financial investigation?
Seizures of currency and cars, etc.
Okay. How long were you assigned there?
Almost a year.
And does that mean a regular 9 to 5 shift?
It's flexible, but it's daytime.
Okay. Tell the jury, what was your assignment within the Atlanta Police Department in September of 2016?
I was assigned to the gang unit as a detective, and I was put on loan to the gun assault unit.
All right. Just so the jury can understand, you said you were put on loan. Within APD world, what does it mean to be loaned out to a specific unit?
It means I had a job as a detective with the gang unit. There was a need somewhere else. They volunteered people to go do something different.
Voluntold?
Voluntold would be the correct word,
Okay.
yes.
And tell the jury about a little bit about what Atlanta Police Department's ag assault unit is. What do they do?
Basically, we investigated anybody who got shot that lived through the shooting. If they would have passed away, the homicide would have taken over.
And as part of your assignment in September of 2016 with this ag assault team, are you what's your home base? Where are you stationed? Where are you working?
The headquarters building on Peak Street.
And what other sort of departments within APD are located there at headquarters?
Special victims, homicide, financial investigations, fugitive. There's quite a few.
Okay, so are you guys on a certain floor of that building, or how is it sectioned off for ag assault?
Currently, they're on the 4th floor.
In September, where were they?
On the 4th and 5th floor, we're kind of separated.
Okay. And what shift were you working within the ag assault team?
That was 4 to midnight.
And during that time period of 4 to midnight, what parts of the city do you cover?
The entire city.
Okay. So as part of your assignment within this ag assault team, you were responsible for all shootings in the entire city where someone survives the shooting. Is that right?
Correct.
What does that mean about, how many officers are assigned to do that job of covering the whole city from 4 to 12 a.m.?
I don't know how many there are now. I want to say there was 6 when I was doing them.
Okay. On September 25th of 2016, were you assigned and working in the ag assault unit like we've been talking about?
Yes.
And how many officers were working that night to cover the city?
I don't remember. I'm sure it was not 6. Less than 6, I'm sure.
Less than. What does that tell the jury in that time period, September of 2016, give them an idea of the volume of calls you might receive on a typical night?
September is still hot weather, so I'm sure it would have been a lot. I don't remember the numbers. It was I was new to that unit at that time, so it was all new to me, having been out of that line of investigative work for quite a while. But I don't recall how busy it was that night.
High volume of calls.
There would have been a high volume of calls citywide for 911 calls. I don't remember how many shootings that day. I know this was my first one that I was called out to.
And so when you responded to this shooting, this was your very first time responding within the AXAL team?
Yes, ma'am.
And you said you were new to the unit. How long had you been in the unit on September 25th, 2016?
I want to say it was probably less than 2 weeks at that time.
And were you working with somebody else on that day?
Yes.
Who were you working with?
Detective Robesino.
And out of the two of you, Detective Robesino and yourself, who had more experience with investigative sort of techniques, interviews, working cases that are commonly within the ag assault unit?
For the ag assault unit type investigations, that would be Detective Robesino.
And why do you say that?
All my work prior to that was more proactive detective work. He was general investigations and had been on the first rotation of being voluntold, which was about 90 days prior to that. So he had more experience than I did.
Okay, and when you say proactive detective work, give the jury an idea of what you're talking about.
I did 5 years in narcotics and 2 years in gangs.
What does that mean?
Narcotics, you investigate drug investigations, try to find low-level buyers, try to work your way up the food chain, do search warrants, that kind of thing. Gang investigations was investigating the gang crimes that are in Atlanta.
And is it fair to say that this shift to the ag assault team would mean kind of a different line of work for you?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you still doing gang work while you are assigned out to ag assault or no?
No.
In this 4 to 12 a.m. shift, tell the jury a little bit about what you would be wearing in a typical shift with the ag assault team.
When I started, I was on loan, so I could wear what I was wearing prior to, which was dressed how y'all are dressed today, whatever you want to wear. And then eventually it became a little bit more professional, and then eventually it was, button-down shirt and dress pants.
Okay. And when you say whatever you want to wear, shorts, t-shirt?
That was acceptable, and that was what I would have been wearing for as long as possible.
Okay. And is that, if you remember, what you were wearing on September 25th, 2016 when you responded to a shooting call?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jury so they know if you get a call towards the end of that shift that might take you over to 1 a.m., 2 a.m., is that something that you continue to work, or at 12 o'clock you assign it out to somebody else?
Continue to work.
Okay. That evening, did you and Detective Robesino get a call that took you to the Emory Hospital on Clifton Road?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jury how you received that call.
We got a call over the radio saying that somebody had been shot and that the victim was at Emory Hospital. And I didn't know how to get there because it's Lake DeKalb County, which is just a part of the place that I've not been. So myself and Detective Robesino drove out there.
Okay. When you drove out there, what kind of car are you in?
Would have been a very old Ford Taurus.
Okay. Marked in any way?
No.
And as you get the call, when you leave for the hospital, do you already have an impression at that time of who's sort of going to take the lead on this?
It was my turn to take the lead, but he knew, and him and I had worked together in the past, he knew that it was my first case and I hadn't been doing that kind of work in quite a while. So it was understood that even though it was my turn to take the lead, he would be assisting and possibly take it over at the time.
And what is Detective Robesino wearing when you all respond that night, if you remember?
I believe he's wearing his uniform.
Well, and I'll ask him, was he as new to the ag assault team as you were at that point, if you know?
No, ma'am, he was on the previous rotation as well.
Do you remember about when that you got that call that took you out to Emory?
I do not. I remember being dark.
Okay. If I told you that the APD dispatch time was about 10:35, does that sound right to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And once you guys get the call, do you go immediately there?
Yes.
Do you go there lights and sirens or just regular response?
Regular response time.
Because you're in an unmarked car.
Correct.
When you pull up to Emory Hospital, what is the first thing that you do?
Try to find out where to park because it was confusing on where to park. And then I want to say somebody directed us on what route to go to when we pull up.
Okay. when you come into the, sort of right there into the front entrance of the hospital, do you encounter, if you remember, other law enforcement?
I don't remember.
And I'm about to ask you a few questions about kind of what you did next. The next step that you took in your investigation, would you have been right alongside with Detective Robeson?
Okay, yes, ma'am, we would have been.
All right, and do you all ever separate for any extended period, go do different things?
Extended period, no, maybe a couple minutes.
Okay, when is the couple minutes time that you're thinking about when you say you separate?
We go back to the room where we were told that the witness and husband were at. And once in that room, we decided soon after that to separate people. And Detective Robeson stepped outside the hall with the husband, I believe, and I was in the room with the driver of the car.
When you say he stepped out into the hall, do you know, is he just literally right outside in the hallway and you're inside the room, or does he go somewhere else?
I think he was right outside in the hallway, right outside the door.
All right. So we sort of skipped ahead, but you go inside and you find out where they are, essentially. Is going back to that room really the first thing that you do at Emory?
I believe so. Once we got in, we were trying to, I want to say, ask some questions on the way in, but just to see where we were going and stuff like that. And once we were directed inside, it was almost like a cafeteria type room we were in.
That you made contact with the people?
Correct.
Let's show you something right here on this board. And if you need to step down, you can. Make sure we're talking about the same file.
That looks like it's all right.
Do you recognize that?
Yeah, let's go.
And that room that I just showed you on, the room that I showed you and that you described as sort of a cafeteria-like room, is that what we just looked at?
Yes, ma'am.
And inside that room, you described coming into contact with the husband. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to show you, I think this is State's Exhibit 3, but I will double check before I'm finished. Is this one of the people or the person that you interacted with that you're calling the husband?
Yes.
Okay. Do you ever interact with who you learn is the driver of the vehicle?
Yes, that is who I mainly interacted with.
State's Exhibit 257. Do you recognize that to be the driver of the vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Who else is inside the room aside from these two people when you first come into that room?
There was, who I thought, there was a nurse, I believe, and I want to say it was the chaplain, as a request of this lady here,
All right.
to stay in the room, and also the attorney.
This is State's 347. You recognize that person as who you're saying is the attorney?
Yes.
So all those people are present when you first approach the room?
Correct.
What happens next when you first come in?
We walk in, and I want to say the first thing that happened was the attorney hands me a business card.
And when you say hands you a card, does he actually give you one, or is he showing you something?
He handed me a business card.
Does he say anything to you about who he is?
He said he was an attorney, and I believe a childhood friend of the other gentleman commissioner.
And do you actually take the business card that he gives you?
Yes.
Do you remember what you did with that card?
I do not.
Okay. Is Detective Robeson standing right there with you as well
Yes.
at this point? Do you have any substantive conversation with Mr. McIver, the husband?
No.
At some point after you enter that room, do you have a conversation with the driver?
Yes.
Tell the jury about that.
It was very brief at that point, trying to figure out where this incident took place. And she was also talking with the chaplain. And I was trying to decide if the chaplain should be involved in the conversation or not. And she asked that she stay, and almost immediately after that, Detective Robesonell came in and said, okay, let's see if we can find out where this took place.
All right, and why, tell the jury, why is figuring out where this happened pretty important for you guys at this juncture?
If it would have happened outside of Atlanta, then the appropriate police department would have been notified and they would have taken over the case.
All right, so you guys don't want to be working a case that didn't happen in APD's
Correct.
territory. Fair to say, do you interview Miss Carter, the driver, at any point in the hospital or in the ride that you later take?
No.
Where do you eventually interview her?
At headquarters.
And why do you choose to interview her there instead of in the car, in the hallway of the hospital?
So it could be recorded, video and audio.
Once you have her outside the room and you're trying to figure out where it happens, what do you guys do next?
The three of us drive to go around the route that she thought she took when she got off the highway and try to figure out where this happened. I remember her saying something somewhere near Piedmont Park. Detective Robesonell was directing me. I was driving, trying to follow the route that was along, I believe, Edgewood Avenue, Auburn Avenue, that area, and then going up towards Piedmont Park to find out where it was at to verify it did indeed happen in Atlanta.
And so how long after you initially arrive at Emory Hospital are you all in the car making that recreation of the route about?
From the time we parked the car until we left again, I want to say maybe 15 or 20 minutes at the most.
And on your way out of the hospital to do this route, are you approached by any nurses or any medical staff of any kind?
No, ma'am.
And on your way out of the hospital, do you tell, or does Detective Robesonell tell, Mr. McIver, where you are taking Ms. Carter, the driver?
I did not, and I don't remember if he did or not.
So you don't say, hey, we're taking her for a ride she'll be right back. And does she have any issue having a conversation with you or talking to you guys at that point about what happened?
Not at all.
So the jury understands, give them an idea of where everybody's positioned in the car as you guys are doing this route.
I don't know where everybody was at in the car. I'm going to say I know I was driving, and normally that would have had the lady would have been in the passenger seat, and Detective Robesonell would have been in the back seat. That's normally what we would have done.
Okay, but you don't have a specific recollection of
No, I
her
don't.
sitting in the front of the seat. So where do you go from Emory Hospital? Best that you can remember.
The best I can remember is we went from the hospital and made our way over to, I want to say, Edgewood Avenue, and went from Edgewood Avenue towards Piedmont. And turned on to Piedmont, and I want to say we made all the way up to maybe the area of the Botanical Garden before we decided that it was in that general area, we just didn't know where. So it was definitely in the city.
Okay. And you were satisfied, or were you satisfied based on what Ms. Carter communicated to you that this in fact did occur somewhere near the Piedmont Park entrance?
Yes, ma'am.
And the area that she described to you and that you identified, what county is that located in?
Fulton County.
As you continue on then past the park entrance, the Botanical Gardens, and sort of begin the route to Emory Hospital,
I'm sorry.
do you continue on back driving like you're going back to Emory Hospital with her, or do
We-
you discontinue the route at that point?
We continued north on Piedmont, and then we eventually just made our way back to the headquarters.
And how far did you make it on Piedmont, if you remember?
I don't recall. It was past the park and past the Botanical Garden. I don't remember how far it was.
You don't remember how far after?
No.
You make your way back to headquarters, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Just so the jury understands, where is that located?
226 Peachtree Street?
Just down the street from where we are now.
Correct.
How far, do you make any stops along the way?
No, ma'am.
About how far, or how long, I guess probably easier question for you, how long does it take you from the end of what you drove back to APD that night?
From the Botanical Garden area back to APD, probably another 15 minutes maybe.
And what do you do once you get back to headquarters?
We find an available interview room, and Detective Robeson and I set up the recording. We might have notified somebody we were in the room, I don't remember. But we basically just started, and once everything was set up, we went in there and began to ask some basic questions.
For jurors who haven't been out to headquarters, haven't been in an interview room there, kind of describe for them what those rooms are like.
It's just almost like a conference room. There's a table in the middle. We would sit on one side. The person we're talking to sits on the other. We take notes. It's being recorded. It's just like a conference room. It's just being recorded is basically the difference. It's not meant to be intimidating at all.
Okay. And when you get out to APD, the drive back, or any time before the recording starts, do you interview or have any conversation with Ms. Carter about the specifics of the shooting?
Not about the specifics, no.
Okay, about anything related to the shooting?
Just on the drive, just casual conversation about traffic or about, I believe she did say why she got off the highway, and she was telling us the route we took and stuff like that, or the route she took.
Why she had to, and when you say why she got off the highway, and you're talking about the traffic that was on the
Correct.
highway at that night?
Yes, ma'am.
Is Detective Robeson with you for the entire
Yes, ma'am.
with him for the entire interview? I'm sorry. Have you been able to review the recording of the interview that you had with Ms. Carter?
Yes.
At this point, are we now into the 26th of September, by the time the interview starts?
It's possible.
Okay, so your shift is due to be over about an hour.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jury about how long is your conversation with Ms. Carter?
Maybe 10 minutes.
When you come into the room and at the time that you're starting that investigation, or that interview, I'm sorry, do you have an understanding of the status of Mrs. McIver, your victim?
As far as details, no, we knew she was alive when we left the hospital. That's all we knew.
Did you know if she was low or not?
I don't recall. I don't think so.
And do you know if Detective Robeson had an idea of her status when you guys started that interview, if you know?
I would object to testimony about what someone else might know.
My question is, did he know if he knew the status? I'd be limiting to this.
Did this person know if Robeson L knew?
Yes.
Okay, I'll sustain the objection.
All right. But you did not know, or you don't recall that you had a specific idea of her status at that point.
Correct.
And then when I asked you if somebody was low, can you tell the jury what that means?
Low means it could go either way. There's a possibility that you may make it, there's a possibility you may not.
And if somebody, once you all already started this investigation, it's ag assault teams at this point, if someone was to pass while you're in the middle of sort of what you're doing now, what happens then?
We notify homicide, it becomes their case immediately.
And so does that switch happen when somebody can come in, or is that an automatic switch?
It's an automatic switch.
How far do you make it into this conversation before you learn something?
It would have been less than 10 minutes, and Detective Robeson gets I believe a text or a call. I'm not sure what she got.
Okay. Once Detective Robeson got a text, what did you guys do next?
We immediately ceased anything at all and notified homicide,
What was the text?
stating that she had passed away.
Diane McIver.
Yes, ma'am.
When you notify homicide, how does that happen? You call somebody, or you physically go somewhere?
It could be either way. I don't remember how we did it that night. It's in the same building. likelihood of us just going there would have been probable since it's right there.
Did you turn over, did you talk to anybody from homicide that night?
I don't remember if I did or not.
Okay. Do you talk to anyone from homicide ever related to this case?
Yes, I would have either that night or within the next day or so.
And who did you talk to from homicide about this case?
Probably whatever detective would have been there. I want to say now that I think back, it was that night, and it was basically just find out what they needed from us going forward.
And do you remember which detective?
I do not.
Okay. Do you remember talking to Detective Darren Smith?
Anybody object to that question? He just said he didn't remember who he done.
He says he doesn't remember.
That's fine. And no, the court will indulge me, no specific recollection as to names of detectives.
Correct.
In your time with gangs, narcotics, and your brief stint with the Ag Assault team, do you remember or have you had regular interactions with homicide?
I did, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and have you had the occasion to do a supplement report or sort of a assisting report narrative for homicide before?
Just that one time, but on this case, yes.
Just on this case?
Yes.
Tell the jury, did you create a report as a result of what you did in this case?
Yes.
How did you create that report?
It's a supplemental report. It's not the same as the police report. It's just basically the point of it was to inform the detectives taking over the case any information at all that might be helpful, or what little bit that I had done going up to that point, so they would have something to go on and there's nothing left out.
And did you, how do you get that to homicide?
I could have either emailed it or I would have just typed it, printed it, and handed it off. I don't remember which I did on this particular one.
And you don't have any specific recollection of how you got what you created to homicide?
Correct.
Have you had a chance to review the report that you created in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And on that report, if you need it, let me know. If you need it to refresh your recollection about anything I'm about to ask you. Tell the jury about the format of that report, how it's generated, your final product.
It's almost just like an email put on a different document. It's just it's brief, it's to the point. Knowing that any questions they have, they can contact me and I can answer anything either over the phone or face-to-face or however is needed.
And is there identifying information anywhere on the report?
I don't remember as far as what you mean by that. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, and I'm going to mark State's Exhibit 384 just for identification purposes at this point.
Okay.
I'm going to show you what's marked as 384. Do you recognize it?
Yes, ma'am.
And does that appear to be a true and correct copy of the report that you generated in this case?
Yes.
Tell the jury, looking at it now, is there any identifying information there on the report?
What do you mean by identifying?
Do you see your name anywhere?
Yes, ma'am.
Where?
Actually, that's not some money.
Okay. On either page of that supplement, do you see your name or badge number?
No.
Okay. Do you see your signature anywhere on that report?
No, ma'am.
What about the date? Do you see that anywhere?
I see a year that is not correct, but no date.
What is the year that's notated on the report?
2013.
Does this report look familiar to you as you review it now?
Yes.
In the report, you give some specific details about what Ms. Carter said to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically, do you reference sort of a description she gives to you about scary people being at the intersection where she exits?
Yes.
Do you remember where she would have told you that information?
That would have been the area of the Auburn Avenue near the highway.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Edgewood Avenue.
right, and maybe my question wasn't where she would have told you that.
In the car ride,
Okay. When during that car ride did she communicate that information to you?
as we were driving through the area, just to basically paint the picture better for us of what they were doing, what they were saying.
Okay. And that's something she described to you there during the actual drive?
Yes.
In the 9-minute interview that you conduct, have you been able to review the transcript of your interview that you did?
Yes, ma'am.
Anywhere in that 9-minute interview, does she mention that detail to you or anything similar to that?
No, ma'am.
Aside from the conversation, this 9-minute conversation and the drive, do you have any other interaction with Ms. Carter or any other witness in this case?
Except for the brief finding out who was who, name, and et cetera at the hospital. No.
Okay, and after you sort of turn things over to homicide, do you have any other interaction with any witnesses in this case?
No, ma'am.
What about with Detective Darren Smith?
If he would have asked me any questions after the fact, then yes, but as far as me going to him with anything, no.
Okay, and you said you don't have a specific recollection of any encounter with him at all?
Correct.
When did you complete the report that you have there in front of you for this case?
I don't know for sure. I would have either done it that night after we were done or the next day.
Okay. Do you have a specific recollection about when you actually created what we see there?
No, ma'am.
Just one moment. I don't have any other questions pending redirect.
Okay. Mr. Harvey, you think your cross would be more than 10 minutes? You get as much time as you need. I'm asking only because taking a break and not. If you think it's about 10 minutes, we'll finish this witness and take a break. If it's going to be 30 minutes, we'll take a break.
No, I think it's going to be 30 minutes, but I can't assure the court that it's going to be 10.
Okay.
So my request would be to take a break now for my own personal.
Okay. Not for that reason, we will take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be breaking for lunch. We started a little late. You started a little. We got you in here a little bit late. But we need to break for lunch at about 12:25. We'll keep it to 45 minutes if you guys can survive with that. But because we're going to need to break then, it doesn't make sense to put off the morning break much longer because it'll just be lunch break anyway. I'm going to try to keep this one kind of short, so I'll have Deputy Murphy checking in with you in more like 5 to 7 minutes rather than 10 to 12 minutes. If you need more time, it's your time and you can have it, but know that lunch is coming at about 12:25 today. Okay, with that, enjoy your break, have birthday celebration part 2, and we'll see you back here in just a few minutes.
Rise for the jurors.
I'll get on the record real quickly while I remember it, and then I'll let you all take your break. During Ms. Clark Palmer's cross-examination of Officer Stroup, there were a few times we went around with, could she ask him about whether Ms. Carter described the shooting as accidental? And the first few theories advanced, in my mind, didn't work. We had a sidebar where a more compelling reason was advanced, and I initially said, all right, why don't you go forward and do that? But it was pitched to me initially as it helps explain why count 5, which is I think it's count 5, it's the first interfering with witnesses, influencing witnesses count about what was purportedly said to Ms. Carter there at the hospital, that it would go to show that Ms. Carter was already saying things that were helpful to Mr. McIver, and so it doesn't make sense that he would try to mislead her about something and influence. But when I asked Ms. Clark Palmer how it would be shown that Mr. McIver was even aware that Ms. Carter purportedly said that, we shifted to a different count that might support one that occurred a month later and that became too remote in my mind. And so ultimately, I sustained the state's continuing objection that it wasn't appropriate. Do you want to add anything to the record?
Yes, I said count 6 when we came up to the sidebar. I meant count 7. Count 7 is the one that deals with Tom Carter because it's the one that happens last. So the point is that in between September 25th, 26th and October 6th, when we have the voicemail to Tom Carter, Mr. McIver and Ms. Carter and Mr. Nichols, there are communications going on about who has said what to who and when. So asking this officer, eliciting from this officer that Ms. Carter on that night said it was an accidental shooting is yet another statement she's made to law enforcement to explain that by the time we get to October 6th, count 7, why is Mr. McIver trying to get Tom Carter, to get Dean Joe Carter to do anything but other than go out and say what she has already said to multiple law enforcement agencies, which is that it was an accidental shooting.
Okay, and I understood the count numbers don't matter so much. Initially, it was being advanced in connection with the first influencing witness count, the hospital scenario, and you pivoted, whatever kind of said it mattered. You made clear the Tom Carter phone call, and I factored that in, issued the ruling that I did. Is Congress anything you want to get on the record in connection with that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, let's take a break. I'll be back out here in literally about 5 minutes this time, just to see if we can keep this going. If you need more time for the break, you can have more time, but you go. All right, thank you, Ms. Price. Mr. Hyde, if you wouldn't mind checking on whether Mr. McIver could rejoin us, that would be great. Thank you. He's on the way. Great. Mr. Hardy, you ready for the jury? Yes, sir. Let's see if they're ready, please. Could you all get Detective Ricker, please?
Do you need a copy of your report?
All rise for the jury.
I need it. Just ask him.
Our jurors are present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. Everyone can be seated. So a quick scheduling update. I checked my email during the break, and this conference call I was supposed to be on at 12:30 today got canceled. So that's why your break went a little bit later. We don't have, gosh, we got to stop at 12:25. We'll still have lunch, but don't say, hey, what's the trick here? It's 12:25, and we've still got a witness on the stand. When we get to a natural break point around lunchtime, we'll take a break for lunch, but we have a little more flexibility. Mr. Hardy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
You are a detective, correct?
No, sir.
All right, so you are this officer.
Correct.
Were you a detective?
Yes, sir.
Were you a detective in 2016?
Yes, sir.
In 2016, as a detective, I understood that you had previously worked for how many years?
As a detective or by the department?
In the department.
As of 2016, it would have been 12 years.
So you were a 12-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department?
At that time, correct.
In a number of different capacities,
Yes.
correct? You had 12 years of experience in either investigating cases. Is that-
Yes, sir.
You
Yes,
gotta
sir.
say yes.
Sorry, yes, sir.
For this young lady and for these folks.
Okay.
You also need to make it clear when the question, I thought you were going to do a list, investigating cases, writing reports.
I was.
Okay.
And I stopped so I could do that seriatim.
Okay.
You had 12 years of experience in investigating cases, correct?
Correct.
You had 12 years of experience in writing reports, correct?
Correct.
You had a number of required continuing education courses, and when I say continuing education courses, updates to keep your professional certification, correct?
Correct.
You were a certified law enforcement officer,
Yes.
obviously. And for 12 years, prior to September of 2016, you had interviewed thousands of people?
Probably as an officer, maybe, not as a detective.
Right? As an officer, you interviewed thousands of people. As a detective, you interviewed approximately how many people?
I don't have a number.
A lot.
Correct.
That'd be fair. So you were, at this particular time, you were no rookie in terms of investigating cases. You're an experienced officer, correct?
It was different kind of investigations, which is a lot different than on paper that you're getting at, I believe.
But yes.
Yes.
You had interviewed many people before, correct?
Correct.
And there are techniques that you use in interviewing people, trying to get the important information that you need to get to continue your investigation, correct?
Correct.
And at the time of your assignment on 9/25 of 2016, that is the background that you had, correct?
Correct.
Narcotics, you interview people, right, in narcotics?
Sometimes, yes.
In gang-related investigations, that includes weapons as well, correct?
Correct.
In narcotics, often includes weapons investigations, correct?
Correct.
And it often includes people that are shot.
Not narcotics, no.
Gangs?
Sometimes, but that would have been done by a different unit, not by the gang unit.
Okay, so the gang unit doesn't investigate gang-related...
We came in after the fact.
Okay. At any rate, you were a very experienced officer. You knew your way around investigations in 9/25 of 2016, correct?
Not the kind of investigations like this, no, sir. That's where we're missing each other a little bit there.
Okay. In these kinds of investigations, the assault investigations, the gun investigations, you would interview people, correct?
Yes.
You would write reports just like you'd done for the past 12 years, correct?
Correct.
So those parts of your job or assignment would have been familiar to you?
For where you're going, yes.
Yes. Right. When a call comes in to the Atlanta Police Department to assign your team to investigate, is there a CAD report that's generated?
Yes.
And when you got the assignment, and I'm going to talk about 9/25 of 2016, when I say CAD, is it generated by APD?
Yes.
Not Emory?
Correct.
Okay. So APD would have a CAD, computer-assisted report, correct?
Correct.
It would indicate the time that the call came in to APD, right?
More than likely, yes.
All right. And you indicated, and I understand that you got dispatched around 10:18 p.m. Would that conform to your recollection?
Yes.
I'm going to object. I think that's a mischaracterization of the evidence.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10:35.
Withdraw.
That sounds right.
Okay. It's up on the board right here, in case you want to take a peek. Does that seem correct to you?
Yes, please.
Okay. And between the time that you were dispatched and arrived, does 11:24 sound appropriate to you as well?
I guess if that's what it says, it seems.
Okay. When you arrived and on your way, did you receive any information? Did you become aware of any other information other than the type of call and the location of the call?
We didn't really get the location of the call. We got the location of the victim.
Okay. And so if you got dispatched at 10:35 and arrived at 11:34, you parked your old Ford unmarked Taurus right there at the entrance?
I believe so. It was the only time I've ever been to that hospital. It was at the West Part.
But that's what you were driving, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did it have blue lights or any kind of police markings or anything like that?
Nothing at all, no.
All right. It just pulled up in the old Ford Taurus. You got out, went into the Emory emergency area, correct?
Yes.
Now, you were in plain clothes.
Yes.
Detective Roberson L. was in his uniform.
Correct.
And I'm sure one of the first things you all did, was identify yourselves to the folks there in the emergency room.
That sounds right.
Right. And then get directed to where the people that were involved were?
Yes.
Did you meet at that particular time with any Emory officers?
I don't remember that.
If you had met with any Emory officers, and if any Emory officers had given you any information, would that have been reflected in either your notes or your report?
I would imagine so, yes.
Okay. Let me give you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 384 for identification purposes. And you can keep that up there while I ask you some more questions, okay?
Okay.
If you need to refer to it. If you got some information from some officer at Emory, would you expect that to be reflected in your report?
If it would have been discussed with me by the officer, yes.
Okay. Just take a quick glance, it's not that long. Is there anything in this particular report reflecting that you got information from an officer at Emory?
No.
Did someone, to your recollection, give you a briefing about what the situation was?
To my recollection, no.
You were directed back to a room that you've identified for us, is that right?
Yes.
And when you got there, there was a doctor there?
A doctor or a nurse, I'm not sure which.
Okay. Someone from the medical personnel at Emory was explaining the situation to the people that were gathered there.
Yeah, it seemed like we might have interrupted something.
Yes, what?
It seemed like we might have interrupted something when we came in.
Once, and you put in your report, back when this was a little bit fresher, that you were directed back to a private room where a doctor was explaining the surgery that was taking place.
Yes.
Okay. So does that refresh your recollection with regard to whether it was a doctor or a nurse?
Yes, if I wrote doctor, then doctor.
You also told us that you separated the parties.
Correct.
Was that your idea?
Probably not.
And,
Probably not.
all right, so if you would, please, if you can, speak up a little bit, because I guess the reporter's having problems. No. I understood yourself and Miss Carter, who you've identified for us, and the chaplain stayed in that little room that you've told us about.
Yes.
And you were the one that was interacting with Miss Carter, right?
Yes.
And were you the one that made the decision to get her to come with you to try to figure out where this event may have happened?
No.
Was that Detective Roberson L. then?
Yes.
You were unsure at that time where this happened, and since Emory was in Decatur, you wanted to be sure that APD had jurisdiction, correct?
Correct.
So already been separated from Mr. McIver. And Detective Robersonell took Miss Carter to try to figure out where this happened.
Correct.
Now, this would have been at least after 11:24, because she didn't arrive, let's assume, until 11:24. How long do you think it would have been that you were there before you left Emory?
I don't remember we weren't in Emory long at all.
Do you recall asking Miss Carter any questions about what may have happened while you were at Emory?
I remember asking Ms. Carter for general information, name, date of birth, address, phone number, stuff like that.
Did you then ask her what happened?
So we've got a situation here where you're asking perfectly appropriate questions, but now that the report's sitting there, the witness is looking down at the report before answering the questions. So let's clear that up.
Yes, I will. I'll be glad to. If you don't remember,
Sir.
and you think that reading the report will refresh your recollection, don't read from the report. You can look at the report and say, oh yeah, now I remember, and I can answer your question.
Okay.
All right? If when reading the report, it doesn't refresh your recollection, say, you know, I still just don't remember.
Okay.
But of course, you understand that one of the whole purposes of writing the report is so it can refresh your recollection if you have to come to testify a year and a half down the road, right?
Correct.
And you understand that other people, like the homicide division, will rely on what you write to determine the course of their investigation, correct?
Usually, yes.
All right.
This type of report was just to assist in the next investigation, which would have been when homicide took over. It wasn't an actual report, so to speak. It was in basically a Cliff's Notes version of some brief material to get them on the right track, knowing that they can ask me whatever they needed to, one-on-one, over the phone or whatever, communicate that way. It wasn't meant to be an actual report as we're talking about as such.
I'm understanding that if you write a report to refresh your recollection down the road, you just write a report with the skeleton information so that you can't refresh your recollection down the road. Is that what you're telling us?
No, I'm telling you I wrote the report to assist the homicide investigator, not for my own recollection down the road.
All right, and in order to assist the homicide division, you would put down information you thought was important, correct?
Correct.
And important in order to assist them going down the road, correct?
Correct.
And important in the sense that this is information that is correct information. It is information that I personally have obtained, and here it is. Hope it helps you, right?
Correct.
I mean, you're not trying to give misinformation to folks that you're trying to help.
No, of course not.
I was going to object to testimony, but looks like he's moving on.
He at least walked away.
Well, does reading your report refresh your recollection as to whether or not at that point at the hospital you asked Ms. Carter what happened?
Looking at the report, it doesn't specify exactly when I talked to her about what happened, if it would have been in the car or in the hospital. So that part isn't clear the way that I wrote the report.
All right, so it doesn't refresh your recollection as to when you asked her what happened?
Knowing how I would have done the investigation, I would have done it at the hospital. Knowing we weren't there for very long, that's where I'm not quite sure.
In order to be able to take the route to determine where the event may have occurred, you by necessity had to ask some questions, correct?
Correct.
You got Ms. Carter from the hospital, got her into the Ford Taurus. and took off from Emory Hospital, correct?
Yes.
And what you understood was that at least the beginning of the route was down at Edgewood, coming off I-85, correct?
In that general area, yes.
Okay. And you traveled from Emory to the Edgewood exit off of 85, correct?
That general area, yes.
Do you recall how long it took you to get there?
No, I did not. I had Detective Urbisano directed me how to get to that area. I wasn't sure how to get from Emory to that area.
Okay. But once you got to the to the Edgewood area, you had, again, by necessity, have had to talk with Ms. Carter to say, okay, where did you get off the expressway, right?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. And she told you, you understood that she got off the first exit going north on 85,
Yes.
correct? North of 20.
Yes.
Right. And she told you, did she not, at the Edgewood exit, that there were a lot of scary people there?
Yes.
You wrote that down,
I did.
You wrote that down in your report, correct?
Yes.
You wrote that down in your report because you thought it was important information to be able to pass along to the homicide division,
Yes.
correct? You also wrote down that Miss Carter also told you that they kept getting stuck at every red light.
Yes.
Right?
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's the same issue with the reading from the report, so I just asked if the detective could just at least make a notation for the record when he's referencing it.
Yeah, or maybe you could hold on to his report and give it back to him if he needs it. Because you're focused on what you need to. I'm noticing you ask the question and then poor Detective Ricker's head goes down, read, and then he answers your question. So that's not working.
Well, I don't know how else to ask the question.
Your questions are fine. I'm asking you to take the report from him.
Well, I'm going to have to go back and give it to him every day.
Stand near him.
I think that's pretty inefficient, but I won't.
That's funny coming from me, but I'll take it.
If you need to, again, if you need to look at it, please refresh your recollection, okay? Did you have a chance to look at this before you came in today?
Not today. I looked at it yesterday. So yeah, last night.
Fairly recently.
Right.
As late as last night, right?
Correct.
All right. Do you recall that Ms. Carter said to you that they kept getting stuck at every red light, and you can use your report to refresh your recollection about that?
I will use my report to reflect my recollection.
So your complete answer is you don't recall.
Correct answer is do not recall.
Okay. Then if it would help, go ahead and take a look at the report.
Yes, that is what I wrote.
All right. Do you recall that Ms. Carter said that Mr. McIver asked Diane, his wife, to hand him the gun from the center console for their safety?
I do recall that.
Okay. And that she thought that Mr. McIver was asleep and then fell back asleep when he had the gun.
That is what I
Saying
read,
that?
yes.
All right. And that they were driving north on Piedmont. They were driving north on Piedmont when Ms. Carter said that she heard the gun go off. Do you remember her saying that?
Yes.
Okay. She also said that she was,
Yeah,
did,
I'm sorry, I'm just going to object to Mr. Harvey just publishing the entire report to the jury by way of questions in that format. So my objection would be to the form of his question.
and I'm asking, did she say?
Right. He's presenting it in a certain way physically that I don't think I'm in a position to control. The questions are appropriate questions based on what has unfolded throughout the trial.
Sure, and I just want to note for the record that the report is still on the witness stand.
It is, but it's being managed in a way now. I'm watching, and Officer Ricker is not immediately looking down, and if he needs to, he's saying he's going to do that.
Now, when you were on this drive, there was no exact point at which Ms. Carter recollected the incident occurred, correct?
Correct.
But you recall that she told you, don't you, that it was right there at Piedmont Park, correct?
I don't remember her saying Piedmont Park. I can look at the report if you would like. If that's
If
what I
you don't
wrote.
remember her saying that, that's fine. Do you recall while you were on this drive that you saw signs to the hospital, being Emory Hospital, that were just past where you were pointed out that this happened?
I do remember that, yes.
Okay. And were they the blue kind of hospital that said Emory sign?
That part I don't remember.
Okay. But you do remember seeing signs, you, not what Ms. Carter told you, you saw signs to Emory Hospital right after, just past where Ms. Carter indicated that the event happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now it was after this ride that Ms. Carter was taken back to APD, correct?
Yes.
And you know that at APD there is audio and visual, correct?
Yes.
And I think you told us on direct that you and Detective Robeson L. set up the audio visual, correct?
He would have set that up.
You or him?
Right.
All right. You knew that when you were going to continue with a more formal interview of Ms. Carter, that it would be audio recorded and video recorded.
That is correct.
So that the exact words would be available to anybody, homicide or whoever else, correct?
Correct.
So given the fact that you knew the exact words were coming, the report that you generated was a report about what was said and what was happening while you were on the drive, because there was no recording, correct?
There was no recording prior to.
And this would have been the drive. There were no notes that you made about what the statement was, because it was going to be there. You were going to have an accurate record of it, and everybody would have an accurate record of that, correct?
I'm sure I understand your question.
Well, you didn't take any notes of the interview at APD because you knew it was audio recorded and video recorded, so everybody would have a word-for-word, accurate transcript of what record of what happened there.
I would have taken notes with anything that I felt that would have jumped out just from my own recollection.
Was there anything else that you could recollect with regard to the events of what you were told by Ms. Carter and what happened that night?
No, we were cut off before we got phone.
All right. And that would have been, would you disagree with me that the interview started at 1:09 a.m.?
I can look at the chart, but I don't remember what time it was.
Yeah, I know. Would you disagree with me that it concluded at 1:19 in 10 seconds?
That sounds about right. It's just late. I don't know.
It was about 10 minutes. All right. The report that you generated for use by folks who were coming in to investigate would have been generated either that evening, correct?
Correct.
You got to say yes. Or the very next day.
Correct.
That's when you do your paperwork, either contemporaneously or right afterwards, so that it's fresh in your recollection.
Correct.
And you can accurately put in the report everything you need to put in.
Yes.
All right. These are your words in the report, right?
Yes.
And it's based upon your recollection contemporaneously with the events as they occurred, correct?
Yes.
A moment, please, Judge. Thank you. That's all.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Ricker, I'm sorry. You told us about your 12 years assigned as a detective within APD, and then you said the investigations that you did were different in some sense. Tell the jury what you mean by that.
Going from an officer, becoming a detective, doing proactive investigations, more so. This is strictly reactive. The gun assault team, somebody gets shot, we react, we go to the scene. That's what we did. Narcotics investigations were, we got a tip, or we see something, or an officer tells us some information. We go from that information, we basically do our own investigation. There are no victims per se, as opposed to a gun assault where somebody had been shot, there was a victim. It's completely different. A lot of times there are no interviews. There's no taking people from point A to point B to put them in a recording room and interview them. That's usually not how the investigations are done.
And so is it fair to say that the interview that you conducted with Ms. Carter on the 25th and 26th was something somewhat unusual for you, despite your years of experience?
Yes, ma'am.
The techniques that you used and developed in your years as an investigator in the gang unit and the narcotics unit, are they different techniques from what you needed on the night of the 25th and the 26th?
Yes, ma'am.
I think Mr. Harvey asked you about, well, they were the same as your assignment within this ag assault unit, but at the time that you conducted this 9-minute interview, how long had you been in the ag assault unit?
Not long at all.
Does 2 weeks sound about right?
Or less.
Okay. The APD CAD, or the computer-aided dispatch, did you pull that for this particular case?
I did not, no.
And whose responsibility is it to pull a CAD or get a CAD for a particular investigation?
It would be the whoever. I might have. All it is calling and asking for the case number, and it's generated by address.
Okay, and did you pull it for this particular case?
I don't remember if I did or not.
The night that we've been talking about, 25th, sort of at the end of your shift, did you respond to other calls that night?
Not after this. I don't remember before.
All right. You don't remember before, yes or no?
No, I do not remember before that.
I think Mr. Harvey asked you about documenting things in a report, the report we've been looking at, or notes. Do you have any notes for this particular case?
No, ma'am.
And did you turn over any notes to any other detectives involved in this case that you remember?
No, ma'am.
And so what we have contained on what's been marked up there in front of you, is that the sum total of the notations you have related to what you did in this case?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey, I think, asked you about an officer, an investigator at Emory Law Enforcement talking to you when you come into the hospital property. Do you know that didn't happen, or do you not recall whether or not that happened?
I don't recall.
Do you know who directed you back? How did you know to go to the family consult?
That part I don't remember.
When you first pulled up to the hospital, did you have a location of the witnesses or the subject?
Not right away. It would have been, somebody would have led us there. I just don't remember how that took place.
I think you talked about Detective Robeson doing a couple things, that it was his idea to separate people and do the interview where you did. Why is that, if he were the lead, to help the jury kind of understand why he's making some of those calls?
Well, can I object to his testifying about why the detective Robeson had done something? I would assume that we're going to be hearing from Robeson.
I've heard that we are. Maybe you can ask it in a different way that doesn't require this witness to speculate why someone else took an action, unless he gave the direction to take that action.
Do you know why Detective Robeson was in the role that he was in that night?
Same question.
Do you have the personal basis for that response?
not based upon that question.
All right, one, I think we kind of covered this a fair amount, but two, if you want to ask him if he knows why, then you can find out how it is he says he knows, then you could get into why, if the basis is a permissible one.
Sure. Do you know why?
Yes, because I was, like I expressed, this is not the kind of detective work I had been doing when I was assigned to this unit. I went to Detective Robinson. I was one of the detectives I went to and basically said, I'm going to need your help, get me up to speed on this kind of stuff because it's not what I have been doing. And since I was riding with him that night, that's why he would have been the one that would eventually, even though it was, when I say the lead, it was my turn. So the next person, the next victim, so to speak, was my turn to be a lead. In this case, he was helping me out, but.
Okay. You told Mr. Harvey that the report that you generated is really not a report, it's more of a Cliff Notes version of the things that you knew at that point. You said that it's sort of a jump-off point if other officers or detectives want to reach out to you.
Is this a question or a statement?
It should seem familiar to you as a question.
Examination, not direct examination.
That's a fair point. I think you're orienting the jury with the witness, but you're soon getting to the question mark part.
I am. Did any detective or investigator related to this case reach out to you about the notes supplement that you created in this case?
I don't remember. My guess is, and I know I'm not.
Don't guess.
Don't guess.
If you don't remember.
I don't remember.
That's fair. The specific statement in your report about the scary people that I asked you about and Mr. Harvey asked you about, where were you when that statement was made to you?
My recollection tells me that would have been on the car ride.
Do you know where in the car ride?
Edgewood Avenue area.
Where, and so this is it as your car is moving up the street, or give the jury a little bit more information about when that would have been said?
Driving from the hospital to, I guess it would be Piedmont Park area, trying to find the location of the crime scene where this took place. Traveling Edgewood and before we would have gotten to Piedmont.
Okay. And the interview that you then documented, did you ask Ms. Carter specifically about what the conditions were like in the Edgewood, Auburn Avenue area as she exited?
I don't remember asking that.
Did you ask her about what kind of people were out there? What prompted the gun coming out in the first place?
I remember her telling me about that. I don't remember if I asked her or not.
Okay. You remember her telling you about the condition of the street or whether or not there were scary people in your 9-minute interview?
The recorded interview, no, I do not remember that part.
Okay. Yesterday and a couple days before and another time, you and I have met, correct?
Yes.
Have you had the opportunity to review the transcript of that 9-minute interview?
I have.
And anywhere in the 9-minute interview?
Sorry, been asked and answered. This was asked on direct examination, so this is not redirect.
It is redirect. I think he went extensively into it on cross.
When you say into what?
The statement about scary people being documented in the interview.
When you say documented in the interview, they were documented in the report. That's where something is documented or spoken during the interview.
Spoken during the interview.
It was gone into on direct. We're going to go back into it, and then under the rule of completeness, I believe I'm entitled to go into the entire interview.
Is that what you want to have happen?
I don't. It's fine. Mr. Harvey wants to go into the entire interview, but my question is tailored specifically to the statement that Mr. Harvey discussed explicitly on cross.
Because it was raised explicitly on direct. You asked the question, you got the answer. I went into it on cross. We moved away. It was explicitly brought up and explicitly asked on direct examination.
Mr. Harvey asked a series of questions about why we do this recorded interview and why it's preserved the way that it is. He also asked Officer Ricker about whether or not that statement is something important that he would have documented in some way. And so it's for those reasons that I've explored the issue on redirect.
Okay, you can keep going if that's the way you want, if that's an okay question.
Do you remember my question at this point?
No, ma'am, you don't. I'm sorry.
Okay. When you are doing this recorded, audio and video recorded interview with Ms. Carter and having reviewed the transcript of that, do you explicitly ask her about scary people or talk to her in any way about the condition of the road or the people that night?
She said that, which is where I wrote it down from the scary people.
She said that, which is, you need to speak up.
I'm sorry, she did mention the scary people, which is why I wrote it in the report. I don't remember how the conversation took place, though.
Did you ask her about that during your recorded interview?
No.
And did she say that to you in any way during your recorded interview?
No.
Mr. Harvey told you, asked you whether or not you wrote your report in the day or that day or the day after that these things happened, you observed these things.
Correct.
But do you remember when you wrote it in this case?
I do not.
Do you have a recollection of when you sent it, when you communicated it to homicide?
I do not.
And do you have a recollection of who you sent it to?
I do not. The severity of the situation would have said that I would have done it more than likely that night, at the latest the next day.
And do you know, you've already told us you don't know how you sent it, right? Email?
Correct.
Do you know if you sent it over in a Word document or a already generated document that we've been looking
Why
at?
is this read?
He said he doesn't know whether it's redirect or not.
That's fine.
Through a variety of questions from two lawyers, and they said, I don't remember how I got the thing to whoever I sent it to.
I got it, and I think, just 1 second. Those are all questions.
Okay. Anything from the jurors?
That's it.
Thank you.
Officer Ricker, did you ever examine the vehicle in which the McIvers and Ms. Carter were traveling?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you know if any other APD officers were dispatched to Emory University Hospital that night, or if it was just you and Robeson?
I do not know.
Do you recall if you, slightly different question, processed the vehicle at all? Opened it, looked for evidence, anything like that?
I do not recall.
All right. Your report that got asked lots of questions about doesn't have your name or badge number on it, and apparently not even the right date. You said it had 2013. Any particular reason why it wouldn't have your identifying information on it?
This form, this report document, this is basically just a form that's filled out. It's not meant to be generated as a report, but it's strictly to pass along information. So that's why there's no date or signature or anything like that. It was just basically making it official by putting on this format, but it was just meant to give the homicide detective some information, some possible.
It's not meant to be a standalone official?
Correct, no.
Okay. All right. Any follow-up, Ms. Conver?
No, yeah.
Mr. Harvey?
The fact that that information is not on there doesn't make the report inaccurate, does it?
I'm sorry, sir?
The fact that your name or badge number or the date is not on there doesn't make the report inaccurate, does it?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Back to zone 2. Next witness.
Robeson now.
Oh, that was awkward.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you should give the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Yes, sir, if you will. Get as close to the mic as you can. For the purposes of the court's record, please state and spell your name.
Investigator L. Malik Robesonel, ELMALIKROBESON-EL.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon.
Can you tell the jury how you are currently employed?
City of Atlanta Police Department,
And how long have you been employed with the City of Atlanta Police Department?
almost 11 years.
And before working with the City of Atlanta Police Department, did you work in law enforcement and any other agencies?
Yes.
Where?
Baltimore City.
Baltimore City?
Yes.
And how long did you work for the Baltimore City Police?
It was 5 years.
You've been in law enforcement for at least 15, 16 years?
Yes.
During your time at, or with the City of Atlanta Police Department, can you tell the jury, I guess, the units that you have worked in?
Yes. I worked in Zone 3 as an officer. I worked in Zone 3 as for criminal investigations division. From Zone 3, I went to Zone 4, worked there, CID unit. I was transferred from Zone 4 to the to the gun unit. From the gun unit, I'm now where I'm currently working is at Zone 5 CID.
And you say the gun unit. Can you tell the jury, is that the same thing as like the aggravated assault
Yes.
team or
Yes.
unit?
Yes, that's the same unit, yes.
And how long did you work with the gun unit or the aggravated assault unit?
Approximately a year.
Approximately a year?
Yes.
And were you assigned to the gun unit back in September of 2016?
Yes.
Okay. And specifically, were you working in the gun unit on September 25th of 2016?
Yes.
And were you working alone? Did you have a partner?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I was working with the partner.
Okay.
Investigative Rickers.
And how long had you and investigator or Detective Rickers, how long have you guys been working together at that point?
We was working together since the unit was put together. Probably 6. He came in the middle of the unit. I think after the unit was put together, like 6 months. I said probably.
So prior to him getting there, you had been assigned to the unit for about 6 months?
Yes.
Okay. And on that night, did you guys respond, or were you dispatched to Emory University Hospital located on Clifton Road?
Yes.
And do you remember about what time you arrived at the hospital?
Not the exact time. It was close to quitting time. So we was working from 4 to 12. So it was around 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Would 11:24
Yes.
sound about right?
Yes, around that.
And when you arrived at the hospital, did you come in contact with any other law enforcement agencies?
Yes, the Emory Police Department, one of the officers from there, the police department.
Do you recall the Emory officer's name?
Officer Stroup. Officer Stroup.
Okay. And do you remember how Officer Stroup or Stroup, I guess depending on the pronunciation, what he looked like?
Yes, he was heavy set, light complexion male. It looked like he was possibly Hispanic.
Okay. And when you first encountered Officer Stroup, did he inform you of what was going on at Emory Hospital?
Yes.
Okay. And after you consulted or you got information from him, where did you go next?
We went directly to the family lounge area.
Okay. And is that inside the ER?
Yes.
Okay. And when you got to the family lounge and family waiting room, what did you observe, or who did you see, or did you see anyone?
Yes, I saw Mr. McIver, Miss Carter, Mr. McIver's lawyer, the chaplain, and the doctor.
Okay. And When you first, I guess, encountered those 5 individuals, did you go inside the room? What did you do first?
Yes, I went inside the room, and I just went inside the room and observed what was going on, and told them that I wanted to speak. We would need to speak with them just to find out what was going on.
Okay. And were they all talking together when you first got into the room?
They weren't all talking together. They had individual conversations going on. Mr. McIver was speaking with the doctor, and Miss Carter was speaking with the chaplain.
Okay. And you said you wanted to speak with the individuals. Did you speak with all of them in the room, or did you leave the room with anyone?
Yes, I stepped outside the room with Mr. McIver.
Okay, and can you tell the jury why, I guess, you separated Mr. McIver from Ms. Carter and the other individuals inside the family waiting room?
Yes, because I wanted to get, that's our practice. You want to separate everyone to get their stories, but we don't do it together.
Okay. I know you said that's our practice. For some of us who aren't in law enforcement, like the jury, what is the purpose, or why do you separate individuals when you're trying to get, statements or talk to individuals about what is occurring?
You want to get everybody's different perspectives and of what occurred.
While speaking with Mr. McIver outside, do you have any substantive, conversation?
No.
Okay. And after speaking with him, did you go back into the family waiting room and approach or speak to Miss Carter?
No. I went back in the room and I spoke with Investigator Rickers.
Okay. And when you were outside in the hallway, what was the next thing that the two of you decided to do?
We decided to take Miss Carter down to headquarters. First, we wanted her to drive us through the scene so we could determine the jurisdiction and where the incident occurred. And from there, we was taking it to the headquarters to question her.
Okay. And why were you taking her to headquarters to question her?
So everything could be recorded.
Okay. Now, did you immediately, after making that determination inside the waiting room, go to your vehicle?
No.
Okay. What did you do prior to leaving the hospital?
As I was leaving the hospital, I was approached by a nurse.
Okay. And do you remember the description or what the nurse who approached you looked like?
Yeah, she was a black male in her 30s. Her hair was pulled to the back. She had on a nurse uniform and scrubs.
Okay. And you said she was a black male that used the pronoun.
I'm sorry, black female. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So she was a black female. She was scrubs. You said she was, what was her body type?
She was average build.
Okay. And without telling me what she told you, did she describe or communicate to you what she observed that was going on in the family waiting room before you got there?
Yes.
And did you get any information or her name, anything else as to how to contact this nurse?
Yes.
Okay. And after you spoke to the nurse and got her information, did you then proceed back to your vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. And did you drive the car?
No.
Who drove?
Investigator Rickers.
Okay. And do you recall where inside the vehicle you were positioned or you sat?
I sat behind Miss Carter.
Okay. So backseat?
Backseat, yes.
Okay. And you said Rickers is driving, so I'm going to assume Miss Carter's in the front seat?
Yes.
Okay. And what kind of car is it?
Taurus, Ford Taurus.
Okay. And is the Ford Taurus a big car?
No.
Okay. Is it a sedan?
Yes.
Okay. And with the position that you're in the vehicle, you're fairly close to both, or are you fairly close to both Investigator Ricker and Ms. Carter?
Yes.
And from the back seat, are you able to hear if there's any conversation going on in the front two seats with Investigator Ricker and Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Okay. And where do you go from the hospital once you're in the car?
We went to the hospital. We drove down Ponce de Leon, and we turned up. I think it was Piedmont. I think it was Piedmont. We drove up to like 14th Street. I know we were in front of Piedmont Park.
Okay.
She said that was the area where the incident occurred, approximately.
So the route that you took from the hospital where you ended up, you said was around 14th Street?
Yeah, around somewhere
Across
in
from
that
the park?
area. Yes.
And is that here in Fulton County, sir?
Yes.
Now, you said you went up Ponce and then turned on Piedmont.
Yes.
Did you ever, I guess, in the route that you took to get to 14th Street, go down Edgewood?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. And during the ride down Ponce and turning on to Piedmont and getting to 14th Street, did you ever hear Ms. Carter say anything about scary people?
Let me object to that. That would call for hearsay. Yeah, move to strike and ask for a cautionary instruction.
No, I didn't.
Well, wait, answer the question. So when there's an objection, don't say anything until we give the green light.
Okay, sorry. Yes.
What was your basis for asking the question?
My basis was that and with the last witnesses in the
Well, without talking about what other witnesses have said in front of this witness.
I guess for inconsistent testimony that's occurred throughout, I guess, the last witness and the witness prior to that.
Okay.
There wasn't any inconsistency at all in what the previous witness said. So,
Well, witnesses, I heard plural here, not just the last witness.
I don't know whether there were any inconsistencies in any of the witnesses' statements. So I object to that
Okay.
on that basis.
All right. I don't have a sufficient recollection as to what witnesses who testified earlier than today may have. There are three people who could be talking about this. I do remember what someone talked about today.
Yes.
I'm not remembering, maybe because it was talked about for so many hours, to say it was inconsistent or consistent. So I'm going to ask you to move on to something else.
Can I respond, Your Honor?
Sure.
I believe,
Wait,
I think we're with the bench.
Okay.
Curtis Harvey.
Still don't answer anything while we're over here.
Say anything about what occurred in the vehicle.
Yes.
And was it an extensive conversation about what occurred in the vehicle?
No, sir.
Okay, and why not?
Because we was trying to, we wanted to wait to get on record.
And when you say on record, what do you mean by that?
We wanted to record the conversation, record the interview.
Now, once you got to 14th Street, determined that was the area, you said you went to headquarters?
Yes.
Okay. And when you got to headquarters, what was the first thing that you did?
We found the room. I was trying to find a room to set her in.
Okay. And did you find an interview room?
Yes.
Okay. And did you then interview with Detective Rickers, Miss Patricia Carter?
Yes.
Okay. And was that audio and video recorded?
Yes, it was.
And did you set up the audio and video recording?
No, sir.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to review the audio and video recording of Ms. Carter's
Yes.
interview? So you know that it was in fact audio and video recording?
Yes.
And during that conversation that you were present, did Ms. Carter ever say anything about scary people?
No.
Okay. And about how long did that interview or conversation with Ms. Carter last?
Approximately 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yes.
And why was it so short?
Because Miss McIver died. I received notification that she died.
And after you received that notification, what did you do?
I left. I left the room and I notified Investigator Rickers that she's dead.
Okay. And at that point, did you and Investigator Rickers continue to interview Ms. Carter?
No, sir.
And why is that?
Because it was now a homicide case.
And now, or as it became a homicide case, did you alert anyone from the homicide unit?
Yes.
Okay. And who do you recall speaking to and discussing what you knew about the case from homicide with?
Investigator Logan.
Okay. And did you do it over the phone or was it in person?
In person.
Okay. And
You said Logan?
Yes, Logan. Yes.
And while talking with Investigator Logan, did you tell him about did you tell him that a nurse had approached you?
Yes.
Did you tell him what the nurse, I guess, told you that she had observed?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did you have any more contact with Ms. Carter?
No.
Okay. Did you have any more contact with the defendant, Mr. McIver?
No.
Okay. Did you have any more involvement in the case at all after you provided that information to Investigator Logan?
No.
Okay. Do you know, or did you do a report for this case?
No.
And why is that, Detective Robinson?
Because I wasn't the primary investigator.
And who was the primary investigator?
Investigator Rickers.
Okay. And was your role to assist Investigator Rickers?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess, is that because he was so new to the unit?
Yes, and we just work together as investigators. We try to help out the best way we can.
And do you know, or did you assist then Investigator Rickers with his report?
No.
Okay. Did you ever have an opportunity to review Investigator Rickers' report at the time that he did it?
No.
Do you know when he did it?
No.
Now, as I guess an investigator or detective, you commonly do report. Do you commonly do reports for your cases?
Yes.
And when you do a report, do you put your name on it?
Yes.
Do you date it?
Yes.
Do you indicate when the report was created in it or on it?
Yes.
Okay, and why do you do all that?
Because those things are important. And it's policy.
Okay. When you say they're important, why are they important?
Because who, what, when, where, why, and how is important in the incident. We need to know those are vital. That's vital information.
And throughout, I guess, that evening, do you recall if you had spoken to Detective Logan before bringing Ms. Carter to APD headquarters?
You said, do I recall having a conversation with him before bringing her to the headquarters?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember why you called him or had the conversation? It's okay if you don't.
No, I don't.
Thank you, Judge. No further questions.
I would like you to go. You determine how quickly you.
That's pretty unfair. That's not true. That is not true. I'm sorry. I'm hungry. I would like to eat. We're at a natural breaking point. I don't need that. You determine when we eat. I do not determine when we eat. We've got 1 6-minute break in the morning. We get 45 minutes at lunch. We get 6 minutes in the afternoon. I don't think that's a fair comment.
Noted. If you're ready, you should proceed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How you doing?
How you doing, sir?
I understand that this particular evening you weren't the lead guy, right?
Correct.
So it was your partner, and I'm sorry, sometimes I mispronounce his name. It's Ricker, right?
Yes.
He was the lead guy,
Yes.
and you were there to assist him, correct?
Correct.
And when you went into the hospital, was he taking the lead? Was he telling you, hey, we need to separate these guys? Or was that you?
That was me.
Okay. And that in fact happened, correct?
Yes.
And Miss Carter was taken with you, correct?
Yes.
All right. And she went. She didn't say, no, I don't want to go.
Correct.
And she was cooperative, as I understand it.
Yes.
She answered any questions that you may have had.
Yes.
Correct? This was in September of 2016, but you didn't write any report, whether it had your name on it or didn't have your name on it, or the date or anything like that. You just simply didn't write a report, correct?
Correct.
All right. And the report about what the who, what, when, where, and why, the important information was delegated to the lead in this case, and that's Detective Riker, correct?
Yes.
All right. You didn't have a chance to review it, correct?
Correct.
You didn't, to this day you haven't reviewed it, correct?
Correct.
All right. So you assume, well, strike that. When you write a report, you put accurate and correct information in it, don't you?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Detective Riker wouldn't misrepresent something.
Objection, Your Honor. False speculation and commenting on veracity of another witness. Sustained.
How long did you work with Detective Riker?
I say approximately 6 months.
6 months.
Yes.
And he had written a number of reports in that time frame, correct?
Yes.
Because you guys traded off on who was the lead and who was not the lead, correct?
Yes.
And he had written a number of reports while he was with that unit during the course of you guys working together, correct?
Yes.
And he, you knew he was experienced, correct?
He didn't have.
Not as you.
Yeah, he had different experience.
Okay. But he wrote reports for your unit before, correct?
Yes.
And he knew the same thing that you told? Did you know whether he knew the same thing as you? Who, what, when, where, and why?
Yes.
You were, in fact, in the back seat during this particular ride, correct?
Yes.
You were on the radio, and it was Detective Riker talking with Miss Carter in the front seat, correct?
Yes.
And how many times were you on the radio?
Okay, I don't know how many times I was on.
Well, when you're on the radio, you're talking to somebody, there's some noise back there, your attention is diverted from what the conversation may or may not have been in the front, correct?
Well, no, that's not true.
Okay, so you're on the radio and listening to the conversation.
Yes.
Any reason that conversation couldn't have been recorded?
No.
Okay. Any reason you couldn't have written a supplemental report?
There's no reason I couldn't.
Okay. As I understand it, you went from Emory down Ponce de Leon to Piedmont?
Yes, it was one of those streets. I wasn't familiar with that area at the time because I'm originally from Zone 3, Zone 4. I know we was across the street from Piedmont Park. That I didn't know.
At the end?
Right.
At the end?
Right.
I'm asking you about where you started. Did you start down at Edgewood?
No.
Didn't even get down to Edgewood?
Right.
Okay. Didn't get down to Edgewood and go up on Edgewood and take a right on Piedmont. Didn't even get downtown.
Right.
To your recollection?
To my recollection.
Okay.
No.
You understand that that the location of this incident was the intersection of Piedmont and 14th.
Yes.
the notes that you took and gave to Detective Logan, they weren't notes of the conversation, they were notes of the description of the nurse and the information of the nurse that you told us about, correct?
Correct.
So there were you didn't even take notes of what was said, what wasn't said, where you went, how long it took, nothing, right?
Correct.
It was just you relying solely and entirely on the integrity and accuracy of Detective Rickard.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Hey, redirect? I have a few questions, Your Honor. Detective Robinson, did you come to the DA's office and give us a summary of what you and your involvement was on September 25th and 26th of 2016?
Yes.
And did you immediately, I guess,
Nope. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Nope. Not yet. I promise I'll let you know. We're not all going to leave the room and you're just sitting there. We'll let you know. Deputy Kane's going to collect a few things and see if there's anything else for you.
Hospital to Piedmont Park at 14th Street. Were you ever on the expressway?
No.
Mr. Hart?
Nothing.
Okay. You're free to go now. I guess you need to write something down for Ms. Price, but then
Yes.
you're free to go. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll break for lunch now. Mr. Harvey's protestations notwithstanding, we'll keep it to 45 minutes. So if you all could try to be back, please, by 1:30ish. We'll try to get started as close to 1:30. Unless you were planning a special lunch that needed to run late. I'm sure Tony shakes his head. Knock it off, Joe. So we'll see you here pretty close to 1:30, and we'll pick up wherever the next witness from the state's going to be. Thank you so much.